Hello folks, and welcome back to part 2 of this Treasury certificate issued by the Committee of 300 working through United Nations organization, as you can see here, involving the Philippine Islands and this ASBLP group of companies and Bank of ASBLP that has a tremendous story behind it. Okay, so for you folks, if you're here, I highly recommend you go and watch the first presentation that I did over on my YouTube, which we'll go to now just to show you quickly, which gives a great backdrop as to what this document is saying and what it's all about, which will be invaluable going forward as we build on this story. Okay, as you can see here, the Committee 300 Treasury Certificate, Breach of Trust Decree. Okay, there's that video. So I highly recommend, folks, if you haven't seen that yet, please head over to my YouTube channel, AG Middleditch, and have a watch of that before jumping on to this one, okay, which we're going to go through. Again, more of the history this time, but we're going to do a little recap as to what we covered and discovered in the first part, okay, which is breaking down this Treasury certificate. And I've just got my notes that I pulled up here just to make sure I'm on course. Okay, and the first one, obviously, I think, is to look at the definition of, the Treasury certificate. Okay, what actually is a Treasury certificate as defined in the definitions? Okay, which is quite simply a short-term debt security issued by the US Treasury, typically with a maturity of 1 year or less. Okay, so historically, these certificates were issued to the public and paid interest through redeemable coupons, but they are no longer offered to the public and are primarily used when the Treasury needs to borrow from the Federal Reserve. Okay, so how does that work in translation to what we have here with following the storyline of the world courts ascertaining with the Philippines and the statesmen and the royal family, the Tolano royal family of the Philippines, having documents and history proving the origin of a lot of the gold bullion, platinum and diamonds, okay, that proliferated through the rest of the world via the Mongolians, okay, through the Mongol Empire around 965 AD. They came to the Philippines and realized the Philippines had a ton of gold, okay, and rare earth commodities that were loaned to them to help proliferate their empire, that they then took and went through Asia and Europe and the Americas. And then obviously, as their empire faded, they're obviously meant to pay that back at least 1-to-1, if not the agreement states 2-to-1, the worth of what was loaned to them. They were then stashed as treasure, right, in these lands, none more so than Europe, that these rising empires of Europe were using to fund and back their campaigns, their empires, their crusades, their expeditions, right, to proliferate throughout the world, which the Spaniards did to obviously conquer the Americas. And then they actually came around to conquer the Philippine Islands, okay, without the consent of the people. This is the storyline that the Filipino royal family and the statesmen put forward to the world court, right, where the Spanish illegally occupied the Philippines for 333 years, as the story goes. And so over that period, the people, obviously the whispers of this gold originating from, around the Mongol period, 965 AD, had carried through as folklore and myth and kept alive as folklore and myth in the general public. But with the private families, they knew the truth. So they held all the records and the documents relating to this, right, as the private royal families do here on the planet, and the elite kind of family lines, right? That they then, were making sure that we need to try and push this forward to reach a resolution to gain back control of our Filipino islands that the Spanish had claimed. Okay, so once the Spanish were kicked out and there was the kind of Filipino revolution, the United States came in circa beginning of the 20th century, reclaimed the islands off of Spain. So Spain sold the islands to the United States, and they were kind of like the intermediaries to settle the dispute. Filipinos were still not happy. And this is when I think around 1940s, 50s, post-World War II, they put this case together where King George VI, I believe in these documents they're stating, had to open up a world court, the international court, in order to hear this case on behalf of the Filipino people represented through the Tolano royal family and these statesmen like President Ferdinand E. Marcos, okay, in order to decide and actually agree that, yes, most of the wealth that were used to back the bullion banks to fund these empires of the rising European settlements, okay, none more so than the Spaniards actually coming back, ironically enough, to the Filipinos and claiming the lands of the Filipinos, kind of using their treasures that were owed back to them ever since the Mongol Empire, is indeed owned by the Philippine people, okay, through the representatives, which, you know, are the government and the royal families, okay, because this treasure was tied and linked to King Luisong Tagiantilano, okay, which was otherwise mystified. His character was mystified in the form of King Bernardo Caprio, okay, throughout the myth and folklore, but he was an actual king, and the Tilano family line has come up through to this present day. It obviously been spliced with the Spanish royal family lines as well, so there's a bit of stitched bloodlines going on there. And this is what the courts deemed to be true and just, to gift back the wealth of the people, which is pretty much most of the global assets, right, with the modern era of how all this banking system and all this wealth was generated, in other words, backed by these bullion banks of all this gold, okay, platinum and diamond, that actually originate from the Philippines, but spread initially by the Mongols and their massive empire, right, through this company, ASBLP group of companies and Bank of ASBLP, to be gifted back to the Filipino people under the last will and testament of King Luisong Tagiantilano, and all the way up through that line, which protected that kind of decree, all right, which obviously all these assets were then held in trust. And under the decree, which is this agreement, C3-AM-01, was expressed the last will and testament of all these successor trustees or successors and heirs, okay, of these individuals who lost the treasure but then refound the treasure, which under President Ferdinand E. Marcos in this current era, from like 1940s up until when he died in 1989, was the being who managed to find all the papers and all the documents and collate all the evidence to present it and then prove and then obviously ensure that these assets are then going to be gifted to the people of the Philippines, 70% of, and 30% to the rest of the world for humanitarian means. Okay, and these were the documents left behind. But however, as things developed, as we, you know, turned the century, came into the 21st century, things were done by the private self-interest cabal families to ensure that that wealth was not released to the rest of the world. Okay, so we went through this document, in other words, highlighted a fascinating story that we're just going to briefly recap, but then dive into more detail as to the history behind this, so you can kind of get a better idea as to what's going on with the storyline and the timeline of events and these different characters and what may have been going on with this sleight of hand when presenting and reading about these characters, which a lot of the time are linked to these kind of bank accounts. Okay, and if you recollect, there was this concept of certificate of live birth, which I found really, really quite profound in regards to kind of emphasizing this public realm and private realm that we find ourselves stuck in with a lot of us that are obviously birthed into this system of just a certificate of birth or birth certificate. You can see here with these folks, okay, who are part of the aristocracy with the royal elite bloodlines and the corporate elite industry leading bloodlines too, which form this committee of 300 to kind of merge the royal family wealth with the kind of, you know, industry expert corporate wealth to form this committee of 300. They're all issuing certificate of live births. Okay, and as I discovered, when going through other documents, when dissecting into the forensics on this and the investigations, that a lot of times individuals, obviously when they're birthed into this realm and this aristocratic bloodline, they're registered on the private side, okay, that issues these certificate of live births, which set up a whole new pathway of, as we know, using birth certificates to open up bank accounts. That's the main reason for identifying yourself within the system. That immediately graduates them to be activated on the private side of the ledger, which is money all backed in gold. Okay, as we saw with this document, everything, all the major central banks are backed in gold bullion. Okay, and there's beyond billions, trillions, duodecillion, I think was a new number, which has 39 zeros that some of these folks are dealing with, okay, in regards to US dollar terms of the amount of gold that they have. That allows them then to be recognized as a living individual under a completely different private law system, dealing with sound money, sound contracts, and sound title. Okay, whereas as we know on the public side, The problem we find ourselves in is being registered with this dead placenta, okay, which is given a birth certificate, which is declared dead, a stillborn who died without a will and testament, viewed with a criminal charge and made security for all the debt. And that obviously is the kind of token piece on the Monopoly board game of the Amity Maritime colorable law, colorable title, colorable money jurisdiction that we get dragged into, thinking that we're that name when we're not, okay, which then we use to open up a bank account, which keeps us all on the public side of the ledger, which is where all the debtors are and where all the dishonor is and where basically the enemies are, okay, because we're the debtors, we're the ones that have been pledged to pay off all this fictional debt. And this is where we have a hard time when we identify with that corporate straw man name that ends legal government created fiction. Okay, so as I said before, what I've worked out, okay, this journey so far is that we must dispose of that estate, that entity, okay, and remove ourselves from the public into the private via the will of the straw man, because all property can be disposed of via will, okay, and otherwise technically liquidate the estate, okay, which I go through in my main presentation over on my website under sovereignty and law. That gives all the information surrounding that, so we can ultimately come back into being recognized like these guys are as soon as they come here with the certificate of live birth. All right, but they certainly use these certificates to set up multiple accounts that are all managed by the one being, okay, over many different years, as we'll discover and reading through these documents. Okay, so again, another important fact to really hit home, folks, is to develop your ability to investigate, to have discernment, and be patient with yourself when doing the forensics on these kind of documents. Okay, because it's taken me 2 weeks, and I was very careful not to jump to conclusions and let things marinate and sit with me, as I then ask questions as to what's going on. And as you spend more time going through it, and you seek other sources to cross-examine, you start building a bigger picture. And that is so important to have, especially patience, when trying to collate a full understanding as to what's going on. And if you can develop that skill and apply it with anything in life, then it will stand you in amazing stead going forward, none more so than with this sovereignty and law journey of the straw man redemption, because it's this kind of mindset of individuals, what they need in order to break free, in order to become your own investigator, your own journalist, ask all the right questions, be patient with yourself, build a case, right? Almost become like a lawyer, start thinking like a lawyer in a case, okay? A private investigator, a detective, okay, and do all the forensics. And now that we have the internet, it's so easy to use all these wonderful resources and get so many amazing resources, from different angles and different sources to read through to start collating a bigger picture and find the answers to these questions that you have, that once you give yourself time to let it marinate and sink in, 7 times exposure, as they say, right, your subconscious will start putting it all together and you'll start connecting more dots, and then it'll just be epiphany upon epiphany upon epiphany as you start seeing the kind of image of the puzzle come together as you put all these pieces in. Then it's so much easier to put the last pieces together as you've got the full image there, like 70% of the image there, okay, using an actual puzzle as an analogy there. All right, so you guys kind of understand what I'm saying. So with that being said, we're just going to go through these notes. So we've done the definition of a Treasury certificate. If you recollect, the codes that I picked up on, which we'll find out when going through these different documents, was this individual, Ferdinand Marcos, right, was the president of the Philippines post-World War II up until 1989, when he passed away, has all of these names linked to him. So King Anthony Santiago Martin, King ASM, ASBLP, AAA 777, Spiritual King David of Israel, Spiritual King Solomon of Israel, TVM, Tiburcio Villamor Marquis, okay, which again is a bit of mystery surrounding this character as well as this character, okay, but there's certainly documents and information linking these names as just accounts, okay, to the same individual, Ferdinand Marcos, right, where there's individuals now claiming that they are King Anthony Santiago Martin and Tiburcio Villamor Marquis. But as we'll see, one of them seems to be a fraud, trying to claim incorrectly the assets, again, of what is held in trust, okay, which is meant to be for the benefit of the people and of the Philippines and the world, okay, which is a lot of assets. Again, just to recollect, listed every single private and central bank account with eternal guarantee, infinite deposit of USD, United States dollars, and all the central banks that are listed here they're all earning 4% per annum, and all of the central banks are deposited with gold. Okay, so we're dealing on the private side of the ledger here. As you can see, 400,000 metric tons of gold. As we'll go through all the certificates on the website, they're dealing in a lot of gold, okay, which is all substance, backed by substance, because the private realm is dealing with the living substance, not the dead, fictional, colorable, ink on paper, two-dimensional plane of fictions, personas. Okay, remember the biggest account was the Central Bank of Switzerland, which had over, I think, probably 80 zeros, and actually counted it, but it's ridiculous, and that was only 4% per annum. And we got all these interesting relics like the Alpha and Omega ring, okay, and everything else that goes with it. All right, so very fascinating. As we'll discover, it will build up upon itself. So we have obviously this one as well, TVM-LSM 666 account. Again, it's just another account, and the TVM is otherwise referring to this individual. You've got Spiritual Wonder Boy, White Eagle, White Mongolian, White Vatican, Code of Quran, etc., etc. Okay, most of it is all linked to the same individual. All right, we see this in the document. The White Mongolian account, okay, which is linked to King Bernardo Caprio, which goes back to the Mongol era, okay, with what happens with them loaning all that gold to the Mongols. White Vatican account is linked to Dr. Jose Rizal, okay, if you recollect, is actually the grandfather of Ferdinand E. Marcos. And then you've got the Kirim account, which is linked to this character, Anthony Diaz Santiago, okay, family origin of King ASM, which again is linked really back to Ferdinand E. Marcos. And then the White Eagle account, which again is linked to Ferdinand E. Marcos. Okay, so we have Dr. Jose Rizal, again, great grandfather of Ferdinand E. Marcos. ASBLP means the New Organization of the People of the Philippines. The C3-AM-01 that you see throughout this document and all these other documents I'm going to go through is otherwise just mentioning this trust decree, okay, or trust agreement, the last will and testament, which is directing everyone as to how these assets should be managed. Which is there in a declaration, as you can see here. It's very clear, and that obviously even the Treasury certificate itself by the United Nations and the international courts recognize that it should be all this wealth held in this trust, okay, with this Treasury certificate, it's basically issuing to the Philippines, have done an appraisal of all the assets, recognize that most of the world's bullion and all these accounts, okay, is owned by the Philippines. And so the United States, through the Committee 300, through the UN, issued this Treasury certificate to basically say, look, okay, here's all these assets you've loaned to us way back when that we've collated, obviously all throughout history up until now. Within a year, this is going to mature and we're going to gift it all back to you. And under this agreement, it's then going to move into the ASBLP companies and the Bank of ASBLP, okay, for it to then follow the trust decree, which is, again, for the benefit of humankind, 30% going to the rest of the world, 70% going to aid in the development of the Philippines. Okay, so by now, this all matured, I think, around 2001, 2000, but then there was like a bit of delay, and I think it was 2005 or 2007, it was meant to all be rolled out, but we've not seen it, okay, which obviously is evidence that there's forces trying to stop this from being rolled out, and they're taking all this wealth for themselves, okay, which goes into the whole kind of Illuminati Leviathan races and the consciousness collectives that they're connected into, which is very anti-Christic, very greedy, very dragon-like. You guys watch Smorg out of Lord of the Rings. It's very similar kind of consciousness of these folks. They don't like sharing. They kind of survival of the fittest, the reptilian brain. There are forces on planet supposedly trying to help with moving this and shifting this over. So all this wealth and this trust decree is released, okay, with otherwise what we found with King Solomon Trust, okay, in this website, these folks claiming, hence why they're presenting all the evidence to say, look, you guys are in breach of trust. And through this organization, who they are, got no idea, but they're making big claims, and they otherwise put forward a very good case, listing all the documents surrounding this Treasury certificate, okay, the history and the agreements, that putting them on notice that basically you guys are in breach of trust, okay, and through each and every one of us, as the beneficiaries to these global assets, we should be holding the trustees accountable too. Okay, and say, hey guys, look, we know about this trust agreement. We know about all the global assets. Where are the benefits? You are in breach of trust. Okay, so we can all collectively put pressure on these folks by simply just sharing this and becoming aware of it, discussing it, and then writing letters in, emails into these agencies, copying them into the website, and put it in your own words as to, what you found, what you know, what you are owed. Okay, so the people are owed this, and if you are the people, we are the people. We can put pressures and demands on them to roll this out. So, King Bernardo Caprio is King Luis Tagiantolano. He's the fella that obviously did the deals with the Mongols, okay, when they came over way back when, 965 AD, around that era. And we ascertained they used multiple registered birthdays, okay, for setting up exclusive accounts, which is mentioned in this document we'll go through in a minute. So notes, we've done the definition of the Treasury certificate. Okay, recap part 1. Clear to see the Treasury certificate is recognising the history and trust decree that defines the use of all these global assets to be used for humanitarian means. Theories, okay, 1, we've got the private bankers have usurped control of these funds, which obviously at the moment looks like it's happened. B, this is all being used to set up offshore siphoning of funds from private to public. In the Philippines, that a lot of these institutions masquerade as charitable and so-called humanitarian, right, when they are far from it. Okay, ASBLP means the new organization of the people of the Philippines. Could be a play on words with what the trust decree was for the beneficiaries to be the people of the Philippines that this company is named as. So we got, those two kind of theories, which kind of tie into the same thing. That's all been usurped. I guess the real negative view of this is that it could all be a ruse from the start in order to disguise this kind of control and transfer of assets within the Illuminati Committee 300 individuals as a humanitarian means. This is all humanitarian. This is what we want. We wish it all to be used for the people. And just like any politician, if anyone's worked it out by now, it's just revolving door politics. And they come in, they're all talking heads. They all promise this, that, and the other, never deliver, because they're just merely the staff at the front counter serving the Happy Meals. When the manager is not even there to be seen, okay, and he's the one that calls all the shots, all right, with the secret team existing behind in the shadow government, which is obviously the Committee 300, okay, so that could also be a truth in all this, unfortunately, but there also could be this fact that they generally did want this to be rolled out for humanitarian means, but there are other interest groups that overpowered those interest groups that kind of wanted it more pro-humanitarian, and so they've kind of really won the fight, and they're now hoarding and controlling these assets in an organizational trust structure that not many people know about at the moment, apart from them, because there's no more information in regards to where the ASBLP companies have shifted the trusteeship, control, and ownership of, because this company has been dissolved, I think, circa 2009, 2010 it was. So we got no idea who's actually managing and controlling these assets, or we do know who's controlling it, but through what kind of organization and shell companies. We haven't got that information. Okay, so they've kept it pretty hush. And as I said before, my first presentation, they put up the ASBLP company website, which is the company that this Treasury certificate was gifting ownership and control of. But since then, it's actually been taken down. I came into this knowledge, and obviously, I think I shared the link to the ASBLP company's website, and then 2 days later, it was taken down. Okay, so who actually owns all these global assets on the public side, so to speak, with like registered companies? I don't know. There's no information. Okay, but it is still in the hands of these greedy, self-interested parties, okay, that have usurped these funds for their own benefit and self-interest. All right, so we got the importance of the certificate of live birth to open bank accounts, private bank account backed by bullion. Again, recognizing the difference between the public and the private realm that these folks are always dealing with. Look at John Wick as well. That's another great movie to dissect and see what happens on the private side, but they're always dealing with gold. Okay, whenever they wanted to transact, Keanu Reeves playing that character John Wick, they're dealing in gold, right? With the hotel he goes to and paying the guys to come and clean up. It's all in gold. So signed by Ferdinand E. Marcos. Okay, this was interesting because this Treasury certificate, I think, was issued in 2006, and then this is what you see a year later when it matured, hence the stamps on 2007. Because by this point, President E. Marcos had deceased, or supposedly, okay, back in 1989. But there is a point in the document that I picked up where his name is mentioned, okay, with the left thumbprint and right thumbprint, but obviously it's non-existent. Okay, so just something I picked up, quite trivial. Just here, as you can see, okay, but it obviously wasn't signed because he's, deceased. So what that does to the document and its validity, I don't know, but it was there anyway, something I picked up. So who is King ASM? Kind of went over this in the first part. He was assigned as trustee in the document. Okay, is he a real being or merely a bank account? And what company is now controlling these assets as ASBLP has been dissolved rather, and website taken down? Okay, if you just recollect, just to jog everyone's memory. So this character, as you can see, this character was otherwise shown on the website, but otherwise since been taken down. And here he is. So supposedly claimed to be the fourth grandson of Ferdinand E. Marcos. Okay, so whether that's true or not, no one knows. But all we know is that there's evidence to suggest that they're just names linked to the same individual, whose last will and testament was pretty clear, defined under this trust decree, okay, which is to gift all this money to the people. So, yeah, the signature duplicates, that's right. So at the end, what's it say here? So will of Ferdinand E. Marcos preserved in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Okay, did they try and destroy that? But copies were made and kept elsewhere by that character, McNamara, I think, who was the president of the World Bank Group at the time. And this was mentioned, I think, around here. Yeah, so you can see here, the late holder, President E. Marcos, right, confirmed and recognized the validity and authenticity of herein testament originating from the late holder and have been originally preserved in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, New York, USA, before it fell down during 9/11 terrorist attack. However, the two original last copies of herein subject have been kept by former World Bank President Robert S. McNamara. Okay, so maybe through the actions of this individual or individuals anticipating what was going to happen there, or they made preservations and copies of this most pertinent case and documents proving that all this wealth should be released to the world under the last will and testament of Ferdinand E. Marcos, which might have been one of the other incentives to knock those towers down, right? Okay, there's another metaphysical explanation of this that goes into the grids of the Earth and what's happening at a kind of more higher interdimensional level with this invisible war. But this certainly does tick a lot of boxes as to backwards engineering a reason why they would have taken those two towers down, right? If that was housing the system to roll out the Sara Jasara and this whole shift of global wealth for the people of the people, which also coincided in the end of, I think, the 70-year bankruptcy that was declared back in 1930s. Okay, that would have ended at 2001. So you always got like 70 years plus 1 year to hash out the renegotiation, whether they want to still remain in bankruptcy or have a jubilee or switch the system that the people in control obviously wanted to extend the bankruptcy and keep this system operating on the public side with this debtor creditor system of operating in bankruptcy, basically capturing everyone as debtors under this birth certificate name game. They managed to gain an upper hand when they wiped the World Trade Centers down. It's a very clear message that no, we're going to bring in our new world order under our austere control and system that we want to implement on behalf of our progenitors, which goes into the form and angelic races of these consciousness collectives. Okay, so the signatures I mentioned towards the end, as I went through it, all I think, because there was kind of like duplicates as I was going through it, but all I think it is basically, you can see here, you've got the executive and financial organization of the Committee of 300. So it's just defining what department of the Committee of 300. Okay, and then as you go down, you'll see kind of like the countries repeat themselves again, but it's under a different department. Okay, and it's otherwise all of the signatories of all these individuals that agreed to roll out all of this world's wealth, these global assets, restructure them, hold them into ASBLP companies, and serve that under the trust decree of the C3-AM-01 agreement, okay, which is the trust indenture. These folks are all guardians and fiduciaries, trustees, and should be following the letter of the law, which is the letter of contract they've agreed to uphold, the trust decree, right, which is basically humanitarian purposes. Okay, so this is the only thing that kind of threw me off is is this guy, King Anthony Santiago Martin, an actual being? or is he linked to the accounts as some of these documents are saying, or both? Okay, obviously he could have set this account up. There could be someone acting on behalf of this agency, of this bank account, as an agent, someone on behalf, of this so-called corporate person, which you could be seeing here, or could actually be the fourth grandson of Ferdinand y Marcos, King Anthony Santiago Martin, who could kind of be held hostage by these private interest groups, threatened, with his life, his family, taken, basically under control. He could have sold out the Filipino people and the rest of the world by joining forces with them, saying, you know what, yeah, no, that's cool. I'll be an agent for you folks, as part of the secret team, right? A jackal answering to the secret team via the CIA and everything else for that hidden world structure. So who knows? Debatable. Could actually be a person who got sold out, person who got threatened, or just another bank account again, and someone stepping up as kind of agent surety to sign on behalf of this entity, which is all just linked to the so-called head of this company that has since been dissolved. All right, but it's the only image we have of this individual that I can find online was with that website that has since been taken down. Okay, so if anyone has any information as to whether this individual is an actual individual or not, the fourth grandson of Ferdinand y Marcos, then please let me know down in the comments. It'd be fascinating to know. It's kind of beside the point, because what we know is the meat and bones of this is that this is an agreement. All the global assets are listed, and all this wealth should be used under the trust decree, which is very clear, written in black and white in plain simple English, for the benefit of humanity. Okay, we're not seeing this. So what else we have here? We have show proof of origin of Illuminati Leviathan races and possible cause as to how all the gold got there in Philippines. Okay, this is what I alluded to. Obviously, you saw into my kind of train of thought. Okay, we got this story, and they go all the way back to the Mongols, right, 965 AD, as it kind of briefly highlights here in the preface, the historical origin of Filipino people's treasury. But they don't explain how did the gold get there in the first place to be loaned out to the Mongols, right? And so I suggest in my research, so I've done a lot of research in the occult, the esoteric sciences. I mean, I wrote a whole book on it called Tales of a Self-Initiate, okay, which is taking information from a lot of different sources, but also linking it into my own first-hand awakening and journey of me remembering who I am, and why I came down here, and what's actually going on. Now we see in Voyages to the Secrets of Amenti by Ashiana Dean, I surmise that the reason why the gold got there in the first place, and those immense treasures hid there in the Philippine Islands, which naturally they do have a lot of golds, okay, and rare earth minerals there to be extracted, was that the Anunnaki came and spliced their own DNA with the local monkeys to create the lulcas-neanderthal primate hominid as a slave race to mine for gold on behalf of the Anunnaki, who needed it to sustain their atmosphere on Nibiru and to help sustain their immortality. Okay, so over the years of them mining and collecting, a lot of it would have been stashed, a lot of it would have been taken by the Anunnaki as to what they needed. The rest left, okay, and then stashed in the kind of mines and treasure hole dungeons of the islands of the Philippines, which were then later used or rediscovered and then used to loan out to the Mongols, okay, which then created the genesis of this whole story. Okay, so some documents, as I mentioned in the first part, that I've read through to suggest that the Philippines are kind of like the origin of the Garden of Eden. Okay, and this otherwise ties in beautifully with the history as outlined by Ashiana Dean, with these folks coming in and doing what they did with genetic engineering to local monkeys to create the so-called lulcas-neanderthals that evolved up. And then at some point, it was actually used to join a Emerald Covenant biogenesis program to bring up fallen souls back into a human angelic template that had already pre-existed, because we were seeded, okay, we were created as a cosmic doctor race to help heal fallen planetary systems, solar systems, galaxies, and individuals and soul groups in order to offer a template to bioregenerate back through that harbored the codes to the interdimensional stargates of our holographic time matrix. Okay, so we're actually a very, very important race, guardians, in fact. But, when we incarnate into a fallen system, which this planet is, we take on the mutations. And in this system, they've got technologies that basically scramble the rest of our DNA as obsolete. Okay, so we get blank slated. We have our memory erased. And then we come through as like a mere shadow of ourselves. but all that junk DNA and that potential of the 12 strand can be activated. And the last being to do that was obviously Joshua 12, Jesus Christ, the real one. So it was 3 different Christs during that period. Okay, 2 of them aligned with the anti-Christic side. One of them was the Emerald Christic, okay, avatar being who successfully activated his 12-strand DNA in order to ascend up and out of it in preparation for this time that we're in, which is the stellar activation cycle, which also aligns with the 25,000-year precession of the equinoxes, where the vertical gates align to open up and allow beings and souls to, basically get up and out of it or come back in, descend and ascend, in order to experience different densities of existence that we've been stuck in, I think, for at least 200,000 years. Okay, so we haven't been able to, the souls here haven't been able to get out for over 200,000 years due to these warring and the anti-Christic forces, doing what they've done, damaging gate structures that don't allow the frequencies to properly merge and blend in order for souls to go up and out, okay, in an otherwise natural, eternal life, backflow, inflow, breathing system of souls being able to come in and out freely and still have remembrance and not have to suffer, the kind of cycle of sorrows that we've suffered as a result of the drama that's unfolded within our time matrix, okay, an exploration of free will. So as you can see here, we've got the angelic human seed in 3, contemporary lineage begins. You can see the origin, so this is the creation of the Leviathan force and related history. Okay, we've got seed in 1. This goes up to the most relevant, which is seed in 3. Okay, so around 250,000 BC, according to Ashiana Dean. Again, don't believe a word I say. Go away and do your investigations. But to me, it certainly ticks a lot of boxes. It makes a lot of sense and tune into the information. Like I said, the things I've experienced and come into certainly cannot be avoided. It certainly should be considered, especially alongside other people's research, even though that's a little bit twisted. That this seems to be the most authentic. That the Enki Enlil Marduk played in the Berian Anunnaki, okay, which are the aquatic ape hominid form, that was the original form, create lulcas-neanderthal primate hominid slave race, okay, via raiding angelic human colonies. Okay, and as you can see, as the drama progressed, this was another key point in the history. The stellar activation cycle, Drac invasion, that's the Draconians, fall of Brennau, okay, 10 code pulse and pole shift. Okay, and ever since that time, we haven't been able to open up the vertical gates to allow souls to actually ascend. Okay, so people have been stuck here for a very long time. Then you got the 155,000 BC, Emerald Covenant Anunnaki Biogenesis program begins. This is where the lulcas-neanderthal Hyperbornean human upgrade 1 to hybrid Lahari Cro-Magnon 1. Okay, and this otherwise outlines a brief snapshot of the history of these cavemen being used for biogenesis contracts to bring everything back up to a human angelic eternal life Christic template in alignment with the law of 1 that allows you the codes to be able to get up and out of this kind of mutated and taken over time matrix. Okay, it's got a lot of issues, problems in fallen consciousness collectives such as these guys who just do not want to play ball in regards to aligning with the law of 1. They want to take dominion and imbue their free will on the rest of creation, obviously, which goes against the whole agreement of them coming in here in the first place in order to explore with these vast arenas. Okay, so they've taken their stance against God, Source, First Eternal, and the Christic ways. So it's a good little snapshot. I'm not going to go into it too much detail, but I'm going to read these 2 paragraphs here. So the human Atlantean nation became progressively overrun with a race called the Anu-Melchizedek Leviathans. The many competing Anunnaki, Draconian, and Reptilian family lines of the Anu-Melchizedek Leviathan races were a product of progressive fallen angelic raiding of an Emerald Covenant hybridization program that began in 155,000 BC. The founders' Emerald Covenant hybridization program was intended to assist the Anunnaki and Draconian reptilian races that had joined the Emerald Covenant to regenerate their DNA templates to reclaim the potentialities of ascension. Genetic engineering was used to combine portions of the angelic human DNA template with that of a composite Anunnaki Draconian reptilian genetic strain, using the Anunnaki slave primate locus DNA, upgrading the Neanderthal first to the Luhari, then to the Eluli Levi and the Eluli Judah and the Eluli Nephi. After thousands of years of evolution on Earth and 5 genetic upgrades, the Eluli Levi Cro-Magnon received its final upgrade to the Homo sapiens 1, Anu Melchizedek. The Anu Melchizedek race, housing incarnations of non-human fallen angelic souls on Emerald Covenant redemption contracts resembled the angelic human 12-tribe races because 5 of 12 human DNA strand templates were genetically engineered into bonding with the hybrid DNA. From the Eluli-Levi stage, the hybrid races could, but were not intended to, naturally procreate with the human race due to the compatibility of the lower DNA strand templates between hybrids and humans. This made the hybrid races, especially the most evolved Melchizedeks, a prime target for fallen angelic races that desired to incarnate their presence on Earth in quest of halls of Amenti dominion. By the later Atlantean period of 10,500 BC, the number of fallen angelic Melchizedek Leviathan of Eluli-Levi hybrid family lines born of fallen angelic raiding of the hybridisation program exceeded those of the Emerald Covenant human and Magi Indigo races. Throughout much of pre-ancient history, Earth's Stargate system remained open and interstellar commerce was commonplace. In later Atlantis, the circumstances led to invasion, formation of the competing Leviathan Atlantean conspiracy, One World Order Dominion agendas, and in 9560 BC, formalization of the Anunnaki Leviathan Luciferian Covenant, One World Order Anunnaki master plan for final capture of Earth and the halls of Amenti stargates. Okay, so if you guys, highly recommend reading this book. It's really, really good. You can see here also mentions that it's the Enlil Decoding Anunnaki in particular, okay, that created the Nibirian primate hominid, lulcas-neanderthal slave race for African gold mines and Middle East labor. Okay, but I suspect backwards engineering the story, they also used it in the Philippines. Okay, because like I said before as well in the first part, I've been to Indonesia and I've seen some of the local monkeys there. And I can definitely see in some of the people very similar genetic expressions. Okay, that would suggest evidence of this hybridization program that did go on. Obviously evolved up through the lineage of these different sets of Cro-Magnon, Eluli-Levi, etc., into the Homo sapien as we know of today. Okay, which is otherwise the origin and genesis of the Illuminati Leviathan bloodlines here on planet, which are stitched bloodlines that carry more aggressive DNA, which makes them more susceptible to their progenitors, which are very, like I said, greedy, selfish, doesn't want to share, which can explain why we're struggling when trying to deal with these folks who are in power on the planet and puppeteered by their progenitors to make sure that they're fulfilling the agendas, basically using them as pawns on this chessboard Earth.
A long time ago, we arrived on this planet after a very long journey. Our ship was heavily damaged, but we were in luck. We had found a planet with air and water and life. My fool of a brother was in charge. He ordered us to try and make contact with the locals. I told him it was a mistake. Of course, I was proven right. We were the only intelligent creatures on the planet. It was ours. We studied the flora and fauna. While the others obsessed over big game, I focused on the small. A new order had arisen, the primates. Then, I did something I knew my brother would never understand. I stole some of our precious Aurelia and gave it to my two favorites, Adam and Eve. I could have waited, let nature take its course. But why not give evolution a nudge? But I learned soon that the paradise was doomed. brother ordered us to take our ship and move underground. You see, the Earth is hollow. In the center, you'll find enough Aurelia for all of us. Enough to power your ship, enough to keep your mother alive. The other Vrils are not as nice as I am. They hate your kind. Won't be easy to get Aurelia from them.
Wasn't planning on asking.
Oh, how human of you. The entrance to the Hollow Earth lies between two mountains on Antarctica.
The entrance to Hollow Earth? Okay. And once I'm down there?
You find the city of Agatha. In the middle of the city lies a temple where they keep the Aurelia. In a simple vessel called the Holy Grail.
What's your angle? Why so eager to help?
I'm running out of option, my dear. Just like you.
Okay, so another really good brief history to go into, which otherwise kind of explains what we're up against. And the fall of Atlantis is obviously when we had the ecliptic, the equator ruptured from the ecliptic, or that's where the ecliptic actually was created. Okay, so the ecliptic, that's right, the ecliptic was ruptured from the equator, which gave us the seasons and the sine wave. Okay, before that, it was in perfect alignment with the solar staff and the earth staff. So the rods and staff could actually link and help feed it energy, all right, sustain the grids of the earth through a kind of D12 mathematical imprint to a certain extent. And then obviously when that happens, it was as a result of them trying to blow up gates here on Earth that created huge cataclysms that actually sunk the continent of Atlantis that was in the Atlantic Ocean. As you can see here, there's maps of it, which is truly fascinating, that I otherwise go into in my book. All right, so obviously when that happened, you can see what was left over, portions of the stargates and the grids that were left with Bermuda, Florida area, and some of the Caribbean, and otherwise United Kingdom, known as Lohas, Northeast Atlantis. Okay, and even Lemuria suffered the sinking due to the shifting of the oceans. Okay, but actually interdimensional speaking, with the angular rotation particle spin and the base pulse rhythm of where it got sucked into was in the Phantom Matrix. That whole continent came out the other side somewhere on another fallen planet, and actually was sucked right down the black hole, unfortunately. And that's why we have there's two black holes over Bermuda Triangle, which is the Phoenix and Falcon black hole caps, or the wormhole networks that are there, and otherwise explains why you have a lot of electromagnetic anomalies and weird phenomena with boats going missing, planes going missing, etc. But just the Babylon Massacre, I just want to read. This is otherwise a great snapshot taken from obviously Voyages 2, Secrets of Amenti. As you can see, the page numbers going into obviously the Council of Nicaea, the Church of Rome, what happened then with the religious dogma. So let's just read that real quick. Omicron Draconian legions, motivated the Nephilim, Anu, Melchizedek, Illuminati races governing the Roman Empire to temporarily join forces with the Galactic Federation and the Pleiadian, Nibiruan Anunnaki. In this unholy alliance, the Nephilim, Luciferian Knights, Templar, Hyksos King, and Jehovian Anunnaki Hassa King, Anu Melchizedek assembled to come up with a cover story to hide from public record the realities of Jeshua's Emerald Covenant mission. Groups of Hassa King rabbis, Hyksos kings, and Knights Templar priests, and Roman Nephilim Knights of Malta launched a crusade to confiscate all records of the Emerald Covenant Essene CDT plate translations. They combined various elements of true history and spiritual teachings with numerous falsifications and massive omissions of Templar and Ascension teachings to create the patriarchal, false God-controlled dogma creed that became the canonized Bible. Their intentions were to forcefully hide all knowledge of the Emerald Covenant Christos realignment mission while they searched for the Ark of the Covenant gold box. They intended to claim the Ark box and prevent the common people from having the Margie Grelking knowledge of the Round Tables to ensure victory of the anti-Christic One World Order Dominion agenda during the 2017 stellar activation cycle. So we're just going to go back to the Babylon massacre. So 3470 BC. This goes in, obviously the Tower of Babel incident. Galactic Federation and Luciferian, Pleiadian, and Iberian Anunnaki races steal Ark of the Covenant gold box and Stargate tools, attempted world dominion beginning in Marduk Anunnaki Draconian held Babylon. Temporary planetary magnetic grid collapse created using Ark tools at Babylon and Iberian dyadic crystal grid at Stonehenge, England, to create reverse violator sequence distortions in Earth's planetary shields, which caused major mutations in the function of the angelic human DNA template. This erased race memory, blocks natural kundalini flow in body, causing pineal, thalamus, hypothalamus, and thyroid gland malfunctions that shorten human lifespan and block interdimensional perception in all but implanted Anu-Melchizedek chosen ones and scrambled natural language patterns. Okay, this is recorded as the Tower of Babel story in the Bible. Grail King races retrieve Ark of the Covenant box and tools, preventing advancement of world dominion through intended pole shifts. Okay, so ever since that, it's just been this hidden battle going on, and this, the Templar, the Knights Templar, the Templar quest again goes into the actual locations of the Universal Stargate Pillar system. Okay, which otherwise, again, just to brief anyone who hasn't seen before, or just reiterate, re-emphasize this hidden knowledge that's not hidden anymore. It's just a matter of being rediscovered again. So it is reseeded here on planet. It's available thanks to the internet. That we have the Stargate Templar Pillar system with all the locations on Earth. Okay, you've got some of the negative bases on Earth. Okay, the 24 Nibirian crystal template bases, doing their nefarious mathematical coding in our morphogenetic field and on Earth, which our DNA is in constant communication with. But we otherwise have the Cathara grids. I might have gone past it. Here it is. That shows you the primary locations of the Stargates and their control sites, which is called a Q site. All right, and what they link into on a galactic level, which is the solar system, and the universal level, okay, which goes up to the 12 dimensions of a holographic time matrix, where dimensions 13, 14, and 15 are the primal light and sound fields, which connect into the inner Eka, which are the lower God worlds. Okay, in order to get out of this time matrix, you must go through dimension 12, up through the gate of Lyra Aramatana, and into the God world gates, okay, of the inner Eka, then up the ladder of creation, the stairway to heaven, so to speak, as published in other works of Yasha Ashiana that I'll go into in my book and other presentations on YouTube based on my book. Okay, they can certainly find quite easily more information on over at our website, arheus.com, okay, in order to get enlightened and learn about all this, and otherwise see it from this lens, which offers, again, another great perspective in regards to trying to decode these myths. All right, and certainly for explaining about where did they get all their gold? Where did the Filipinos get all their gold from? To then loan out to the Mongols that they then use to proliferate across the world. Makes sense. The Anunnaki coming here, splicing the DNA of monkeys, using them to mine for gold. Whatever was left over, they just stashed copious amounts of it on planet in the Philippines. Obviously, they were used in other places too, like Africa. Okay, as it said, in the Middle East, but certainly, absolutely would have been used in the Philippines, and that would have been the reason why and how that gold got there in the first place. Okay, and that's why I speculate. Obviously, can't prove, but we can use our logic and reasoning here when backwards engineering and looking at all the other evidence and sources for you guys to make your own conclusion. That's certainly what I'm coming to the conclusion of at the moment. That makes the most sense to me. All right, so that is that. We're going to now go through the notes, okay, which is going to take us through the history and the website a little bit relating to all these documents, okay, that we're just going to skim through. As you can see here, this is otherwise the history page on kingsolomontrust.com. All right, and this is otherwise taken out of pretty much slightly different variation, more in depth as to otherwise what we see with the preface. Again, the Committee of 300 document here. All right, I'm just going to go through my notes. So to recap, origin of these huge funds in the Philippines supposedly comes from King Bernardo Caprio, which I found out it's King Luis on Tagliantolano, an actual royal family member in the Philippines at the time, who was a legendary figure in Philippine mythology. The original name of this hero was lost, but we've found it. It's not lost anymore. And the name we have now was Hispanicized during the Spanish occupation. So it claims the lands of the Philippines are spiritual and linked to the Bible, with some descendants being from the spiritual tribes of Israel. Okay, so these notes are actually taken from this body of text right here. King Bernardo Caprio was the original holder of White Mongolian account, and the Mongolian raiders were signed into a contract that stated the Mongolian adventurers must pay back to the Philippine Islands twice the amount of weight in gold, or at least the same weight in gold in which these treasures were took and expanded and preserved into more lands where the Mongolians occupied. We have the ancient European leaders admitted they recovered some of these treasures and used these treasures to hunt for more lands outside of Europe that served to proliferate their empires in European competition of land occupation. From these treasures, Europeans successfully landed to all lands worldwide until the Spaniards landed on the Philippine Islands and took the islands and occupied them without consent of the people. So Spain successfully captured the islands using Caprio's treasures and occupied the lands for 333 years, from the year 1565 to 1898. Dr. Rizal, who was born in 1861 and supposedly died in 1896, was a Filipino nationalist, writer and polymath, active at the end of the Spanish colonial period of the Philippines. He became a writer and key member of the Filipino propaganda movement, which advocated political reforms for the colony under Spain. He reconstituted the wealth in the name of the people of the Philippine Islands under White Vatican account, and his death brought Spain under trouble and end of illegal occupation. With the aid of the American authorities, that caused to end the conflict and made a treaty, which was the Treaty of Paris in 1898, which was ratified between the United States and Spain. And the United States paid Spain $20 million of total land area covering the islands of Luzon to the islands of Sabah, which was over 452,000 square kilometers. Dr. Rizal apparently went to China to receive custody of Caprio's documents held by the Chinese Emperor Gaozu, which was in Hong Kong under custody of the British. Okay, he then traveled to Madrid, Vienna, London, Paris, and Berlin before returning to the Philippines. Okay, so this is where the lost treasures and the kind of the breadcrumbs were really revoked and reactivated or reignited, as it were, which set everything in motion come the turn of the 21st century. For President E. Marcos to pick up and proliferate in order to man's their global assets, their treasures back, basically, which the international courts through this document affirmed. So US authorities then occupied the islands under treaty without any confirmation if the people of the islands will be permitted by them to occupy the lands. They ordered a great resurvey of the lands in the Philippines. Mentions the selling and transfer of title of the lands from Dr. Rizal to General Emilio Aguinaldo, this character here, as you can see, part of the Filipino revolutionary statesman, military leader. Change of trusteeship over the treasures of Caprio and Rizal. General Emilio rose through the ranks to become general of the Revolutionary Army against the Spanish forces. Declared first Philippine Republic president in 1899, fought against the United States after they refused to recognize Philippine independence following the Spanish-American War. Led the Philippine forces in the Philippine-American War, which lasted from 1899 to 1902, but was then captured in 1901, where he pledged allegiance to the United States and illegally, supposedly, sold the Philippines to the USA. Okay, so I'm not too sure what happened there. So I thought the United States already had it off the hands of the Spanish. Okay, but this folk, otherwise kind of, for me, plugged in, I guess, the time from when Dr. Rizal died, which was going to be President E. Ferdinand's great-grandfather, to President E. Ferdinand, okay, and whether General Emilio Aguinaldo was kind of related, I'm not too sure, okay, but he certainly kept this kind of alive in regards to the Filipino treasures and, trying to get to the post-World War II era that Ferdinand E. Marcos was then able to, with what was recovered through Dr. Rizal's efforts, especially, to put this case together to claim back, all their treasures. So we have World War I. It states about the hosts, of World War I, possibly the victors, debating about the sharing of benefits to be collected from the White Mongolian and Vatican account. America left the islands during World War II, and the UN General Assembly, President Carlos P. Romulo, gave the stipulation that the Philippine Islands will be granted independence if within 50 years since the establishment of the United Nations organization, they pay 100 million to the United States. President Karl Donitz, from 1891 to 1980, commander of the Germans' U-boat fleet and appointed Reich president in May 1945, admits the loot of the Axis powers belonged to the people of the Philippines, and also states that both Adolf Hitler, son of Ignacio Enrico Coronado, and Tomoyuki Yamashita, son of Judge Alfonso Pujol, were half Filipino natives. Adolf Hitler apparently went to Paris to claim Caprio's treasures as his own. Dr. Rizal, during his time in Madrid, deposited the Alpha and Omega ring there, which was also claimed, among much other treasures, by the Axis powers that Dr. Rizal deposited into the White Vatican account. When we couple this with the history in this other document, it's going to plug a few gaps and make more sense. Some of these treasures were apparently hidden by the Axis powers, and through UN case number 4136, I tried to search this, I couldn't find anything online, since obviously been taken down. They confirmed some of the treasures were property of Caprio and Rizal, and in 1945, the International Court of Justice decided to grant petition for certiorari, which is basically Latin for being able to demand retrieval of said lost looted treasures of the Axis powers, and given 30 years from the time of execution of said case to hunt elsewhere in the world and to retrieve for the benefit of their country. It says the undersigned, Ferdinand Marcos, went to Mount Sinacuan, a town of Ariat Pamplona province, to meet Madame Epifania M. Coronado Castellanos, or Maria Sinacuan, and he or she handed over the Alpha Omega ring to the undersigned, Ferdinand Marcos, and some maps of hidden Caprio's and Rizal's treasures to the undersigned as surrendered by General Yamashita, to her, and successfully obtained by Madame Orlando M. Rivas, or Maria Makiling, and identified as Queen Esther of Persia in Israel. And until the undersigned successfully gained office of the presidency on November 30th, 1965, and the undersigned was undertaken to recover those Philippine treasures, including those documented treasures sent abroad and held at banks in Europe, Asia, and America, including the World Bank Group, where petitioners for those countries filed a demand letter against the undersigned to return to them those recovered alleged treasures. The International Court ruled to reaffirm the conclusiveness of those certified deposits of treasures for the Filipino people, as those deposits were allocated for the Filipino people, which were hid by the Axis powers and unexpectedly recovered during his time of office. So sometime in 1976, President Ferdinand Marcos bought the Philippines back from the US, for 100 million, as officially priced and executed by and between President Gerald Ford and the undersigned in the White House, Washington, D.C., USA. They agreed to recognize their lost assets and property recovered and recognized by the undersigned as assets and properties of the Filipino people that still identify as assets and property of King Caprio. Sometime in 1976, Ferdinand Marcos executed contracts of agreement with HM Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace, England, leaving her with the Alpha and Omega ring, where the Committee of 300 under Queen Elizabeth II was designated as trustee over said deposits, and the committee were to use those assets as per the global agreement held by C3-AM-01, which obviously stipulated again 70% for the Filipino people, 30% for the rest of the world for humanitarian means. Multiple parties appear to shift that wealth to them, but there's a spiritual warning over said wealth that those wealth will never be set for personal or self-vested interest. It seems something happened that stymied the release of funds to the Philippine people that was originally intended, that involved political unrest following the assassination of Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. in 1983, which brought his widow, Corazon Aquino, to the political forefront, where she ruled as president from 1986 to 1992, who supposedly won presidency via cheating and unparalleled revolt, and that President Ferdinand Marcos had entrusted the office to Judge Pujol, but he also made secret deals with the World Bank behind his back, without reaffirmation of the Philippine Congress. President Ferdinand Marcos passed away in 1989 in Hawaii. By virtue of the international rulings over these cases, these matured funds were cleared from any illegal or criminal offences and subject to be claimed by the people of the Philippine Islands only through ASBLP Group of Companies and Bank of ASBLP, with reconfirmed international registry in the Committee of 300 as represented by King Anthony Santiago Martin, supposedly the fourth grandson of Ferdinand E. Marcos. Now, King Solomon Trust is now claiming to be the rightful owner of this wealth, and has taken action to penalise the signatories involved who usurped the funds. Okay, and that's this website we got open now. So on the website, we have this, okay, provenances, as you can see here. Okay, and just to skim over it with my notes, which again is just outlining more of the same, but just more detail. It says final compromise agreement refers to Ferdinand Marcos's code name AAA777, the spiritual King Solomon of Israel. Mentions the payment of the islands to the USA with gold held beneath the World Trade Center. Also mentions about the monetary land payments, and the maturity of this deposit shall take effect on September 11th, 2001. How interesting. That's what I mean. You connect the dots. It certainly could have been a reason why they wanted to put the towers down. Wherein said maturity shall be claimed direct by the United States of America if the World Trade Center with 110 stories in New York must not be destroyed as planned by the second party in that same maturity date. But if it will be destroyed, the maturity shall be absorbed direct by the mother account to be handled by Anthony Santiago Martin through ASBLP company. So the second party in this agreement was Queen Elizabeth. Okay, Ferdinand E. Marcos, which represented as the first party, HM Queen Elizabeth represented as the second party. Okay, so the veracity of this document, not too sure. I mean, this, it's just kind of printed on the website, so who knows, but just, there for consideration. And then it also lists the signatories being Ferdinand E. Marcos. Okay, these steps, these different parties, as you can see, a senator, etc. So Ferdinand E. Marcos, Queen Elizabeth, Ronald Reagan, Barbara B. Conable Jr., World Bank Group, Secretary General Javier Perez de Cuellar of the United Nations Organization. So if we go down to the history again, okay, this is otherwise outlining a little bit more in depth the history. So it mentions treasures ended up in the possession of Ferdinand Marcos through the channeled events of King Bernardo Caprio, or spiritual Judge Samson of Israel, who shared testimony over said treasures of the Philippine Islands through papers of his legal deposits under White Mongolia accounts, and who acquired from foreign traders an Alpha and Omega ring with an old text printed paper from time of Adam into Noah, into Prophet Moses, Judge Samson, King David, and King Solomon of Israel, that the undersigned hereunto will be transmitted directly to Anthony Santiago Martin under the code names of account Spiritual Wonder Boy, Spiritual King David of Israel, Spiritual Bathsheba of Israel, etc. Remember the code sheet? Just to put it back up, just to remind you folks, the codes will go back to this gentleman, but it's all aliases and account names for the same individuals controlling those accounts. We're dealing in bank accounts. Okay. So these treasures, way back as early as 965 AD, had been traded and negotiated by King Caprio and foreign traders such as the Mongols, Koreans, Indians, Malays, Japanese, and Chinese. In exchange for trade and loans with the foreign trader, they agreed to pay back these treasures they had took and proliferated throughout the world, given their empires, especially the Mongolian Empire, at least the same amount, sometimes twice what was loaned out. Between 965 to year 1000, the Mongolians agreed such trade deals, but then raided and invaded Philippines, where documents of King Caprio showed he had left these treasures taken for the people of the Philippines. So the Mongolians spread through Asia, then into Europe between 1206 and 1294 AD, including the Holy Land and Eastern Europe and some of the remote areas of American continents, until Mongolia ended their reoccupation of more lands in the world, leaving said Caprio's documents in China. Then continues the same story with how these treasures were then captured and used by European conquerors to raid and settle on foreign lands within their respective empires, none more so than Spain, who came and occupied the Philippines for 333 years. It also mentions Maria Clara del Prado, a character in Dr. Rizal's novel representing the ideal Filipino woman, and also Maria Banahor, which is a mystical mountain known as Mount Banahor, which is a volcano known for its religious and mystical significance in the Philippines, known as the Holy Mountain, and how this character handed over the Alpha and Omega ring to Dr. Rizal with a message that he must go to China to recover Caprio's documents about the treasures held in custody by the Chinese Emperor Guangxu. Okay, so yeah, a little bit more on the history there. So we go through these little tabs. So you've got the 1949 TVM. Remember that stands for Tiburcio Villamor Marcos. And it says here, backup of victory notes. Okay, it seems to be delivery of gold to the old treasury of Philippines and Manila through old Spanish dungeon, ex-gold refinery by Johnson at Mathey smelting plant. Okay, so there's some of the evidence of the the dealings going on with the Philippines at the time and the gold deliveries. You can see some of the signatories here back in 1949. So we've got the 1950 bilateral minefield breakthrough successor agreement, and this is otherwise describing an international agreement concerning ownership of global assets. Point 9 states that delivery receipts shall be issued by the Philippines before transporting to other prime banks around the world. The gold, okay, the assets, commodities declared free from all liens and encumbrances, no criminal origin, free from taxes, with custom duty and insurance company approved and amended. Point 11 discusses Baylor-Bailey agreement and to return the property in good faith by virtue of the rule of Trilateral Society of Global Funder must disagreed. The Article 61 made by the Embargo Act 1807 shall be implemented without court order. So it's just basically showing the stipulations of penalising what can happen if this isn't seen through. This agreement isn't seen through. Stipulating the contract signed by Elpidio Quirino, then president of Philippines, Sergio Osmina mandate of the Crux Villanor Talonos family clan property, and Harry S. Truman. Okay, there are more signatories to this document mentioned under notary public page. Okay, so as you can see, just move this over a little bit. All the codes, there's a lot of codes, but this is the stipulation, the agreement. And there's the signatories. Okay, and the next one, 1952 Treaty of Agreement, Article 4, an Embargo Act of 1807. The Trilateral Commission, 50 years of trust deposited in the Allied Nations of gold, platinum, and diamonds. Ferdinand Marcos listed here as being Chief Legal Counsel of the TVM LSM 666, so all links to him. Father Jose Antonio Diaz, alias Severino Saint Romana et al., supposedly CIA operatives, metal trustee depositor of TVM LSM 666, and William V. Morales, represented on behalf of Cruz Villamor Talana's family clan, Code of Quran, okay, sole heir successor of the World Asset and Trust. Deposit certifies that commodities is under one umbrella, which is this TVM LSM 666, detailing the assets to be removable in the year 2005. Okay, so that's quite interesting. So you have the last will and testament for successor trustee in favour of TVM LSM 666. The notes I jotted down on this was basically confirming the transfer of ownership structure of world assets to be held with the King Santiago Martin, with the ASBLB companies and bank. Okay, from what I could read, it's quite difficult to read, but I did go through and just basically surmised what it's saying, which again is quite interesting. We've got the 1962 last will and testament for TVM LSM 666 as successor of Code of Quran, flat trust accounts. Okay, and this I put notes and I said bequeathed to grandson, TVM, code name LSM 666, all properties within the Code of Quran flat. Okay, so again, I mentioned to grandson. So, whether this is, of course, it's all linked to Ferdinand y Marcos, these accounts, but whether they're actually grandsons or not, like I said, King Anthony Santiago Martin's claimed to be the fourth grandson, which implies he does have others. Okay, so who knows? And who knows the veracity of these documents? Again, it's just there to be considered. It's just information. Do with this as you please. Okay, we're just trying to, formulate the plot, the timeline, and the story behind all this, and the evidence that they put forward. So you've got the 1965 certificate of trust deposit of 4,750 tons of gold. That's what they're presenting. Okay, and you can see in the background is this kind of emblem of the Alpha Omega order. Okay, which I've got a clear image of that I'll bring up later in a Google Drive folder, which is quite interesting. Okay, and then we have the 1972 Compromise Agreement, LRC Civil Case number 3957, ordering the return of 617,500 tons of gold. This is a rather large document, okay, that I've only just skimmed through. but it's certainly there on the website for people to go through to have a read. We have the 1974 waiver of rights of 1 million tons of gold trust deposit in Yugoslavia. Okay, put in trust for Ferdinand E. Marcos, son to Berkshire Villamor Marcos. Again, this character seems to crop up quite a lot. TVM. Then we have the 1974 trust deposit in Allied Nations for 50 years, which again detailing the legal owner to be Tiburcio Villamor Marcos. 1974 Supreme Court order penalising $2 billion for each land and gold grabber for this code account or agreement. And this mentions that all the gold assets shared in the 50-year loan agreement was deposited by trustor TVM, represented by Father Jose Antonio Diaz, alias Severino Saint Romana, and his 18 aliases et al., assisted by TVM, legal counsel attorney Ferdinand Andrano Marcos, and Mr. Ayar Sakano of Indonesia, code INA, decision ordering return of all assets and penalty of $2 billion and to return all property and assets to Berkshire Villamor Marcos. Then we have the 1976 Sovereign Agreement, declare a nation sovereignty with Ferdinand Marcos and or King Santiago Martin, who will become King President of the Philippine Islands sometime in the future. And it's kind of difficult. So you're dealing on the private side here, so a lot of these characters want to remain kind of private, not have much information about them in the public. But yeah, like I said, it could just be bank accounts, whether it's actual individuals or not. So 1976 TVM LSM 66 certificate of entitlement for over, I think that's 1 billion tons of gold. Okay, it's pretty remarkable. And my notes I put in mentions in paragraph 2 there have been AU metals grand total of over 1 billion metric tons, precious stone and real estate property covered by this agreement, consisting of 7,169 islands and islets under the umbrella code accounts, deposited in trust in different bullion banks around the world, intended to back up the managerial papers currency under General Order No. 1 in accordance with Republic Act 255 of the Central Bank of Philippines, adopted in the International Banking Law Bailment, confirmed and signed by Tiburcio E. Marcos. Because it's basically kind of declaring the wealth of the lands of the Philippines and what's owed to it, which is over 1 billion tons of gold that were then obviously, I guess, used to spread out throughout the world, or certainly within this 50-year agreement, right, to back the paper currencies during that period, which is actually quite fascinating. It's a lot of gold, though. So 1976 TVM LSM 66 confirmation of trust deposit of 300 duodecillion. Reconfirmation of trust deposit in trust to 9 World Bank and 7 IMF El Banco Espanol offshore capital DETVM, confirming backup of uncut US dollars, yen, euro, NKD, RM, fund transfer all over the world under ECOSOC, United Nations Article 555763, issued to TVM. That account not signed by TVM. All right, it's another interesting one. Then we have the 1976 flat MCD Quran certificate of deposit worth 300 duodecillion. And this is otherwise in trust to 9 world banks, 7 International Monetary Fund, IMF, deposited in special grants under Global Account Code, Mother Account Code of Quran, flat MCD LSM. Protected by a Treaty of Perpetual Number, no signature nor mention of TVM in this one. We have here 1976 CB certification of gold deposit in favour of TVM LSM 666. Details gold deposits of 400,000 tons of gold in trust in the Philippines for backup with the victory notes in the year 1952 and 1976. The President of the Republic of the Philippines, Ferdinand E. Marcos, issued ABL denominations from 1975 up to 1983 and will be restructured from 1983 to 2003 with moratorium of 2 years ended 2005. Certifies that 217,500 metric tons of gold was delivered to Asia Pacific nations for 40 years ended 2005 and 1 million metric tons of gold, diamond, and platinum with the Yugoslavia government. It mentions Ferdinand Marcos being legal counsel TVM in his account. So we have the 1976 inventory list of 1.9 million tons of gold owned by El Banco Español de Isabel II. Okay, bill of lading issued by the Central Bank of Philippines to Princess Anamicia C. Villamor has 2 shipment orders of 950 million metric tons of gold to be delivered, one in 1933 and the other in 1942. As you can see here, 1933, 1942. Let me just bring up a minute the Google Dropbox. Show you some of the symbolism surrounding Alpha and Omega, secret order. There it is, Supreme Commander, Alpha and Omega, TVM LSM 666. And it says here, members of the International Security Council, United Nations. Alpha Omega, Alpha Omega, Universal Queen of Queens. All right, just to remind you folks, I mean, this is where I'm at in my stage of the journey in my research. The Alpha and Omega, unfortunately, goes into the not so benevolent group of beings in the black hole 4 matrices. Okay, Alpha Omega 4, Dragon's Eye, Caduceus rods, Alpha Omega bases, White Fall, Full White Dragon Aquari, okay, Alpha Omega rod bases, etc. So yeah, no bueno, unfortunately. A lot of these folks. And this is taken from, again, some of Ashiana Dean's workshop manuals. Fallen Angelic Metatronic Alpha Omega base pulse rhythm activation. Okay, so this goes into the black hole 4 technologies and cults of these fallen dragons and fallen beings. Okay, I mentioned the Alpha Omega temples. So yeah, coming from her perspective, it kind of makes sense. If the Book of Revelation is actually written by the fallen angelics to prophesy their dominion quest of taking over Earth and ripping our time matrix down a black hole, it makes sense that at the end it's going to be their savior, their little puppet, Jesus Christ, in the form of Jesus Christ, what we've been brainwashed to believe is his image as the Alpha and Omega, and you know, coming out of the house of David, which actually connects into the J9 line that actually goes into the 3 Christ history, control base, etc. Okay, so just to remind you folks what we're dealing with here, even though it's kind of like coming from a lens of humanitarian means, you can't deny the symbolism. I certainly do not overlook the symbolism, because Alpha Omega is no bueno. All right, so when you come from eternal God source of first creation, right, who has no beginning and no end, that the beginning and end comes from somewhere in external creation when a black hole was created, and then their sometime distorted, inverted reality domains, holographically speaking, where they have their hierarchy of God and dominionship. That's where, in their false heavens, etc., and false reality domains that need to eat and feed on itself to sustain its existence from the living side of the matrix. That's what we're dealing with. Okay, these guys on the dominion quest, agenda, black hole, fall of finite life. Okay, and yeah, they have a beginning and they have an end because they're stuck in time and they aren't able to develop the codes to come back to a 12-strand DNA imprint to ascend up and out of these holographic time matrices, okay, which are the prerequisites. It's quite easy when we pour ourselves into these arenas to experience free will. But there is potential of, you know, evil to be explored and beings to take on the opposite expression of what we all agreed to come into under, you know, universal law of one, recognizing all of us as a divine expression of the same source, the self, okay, just having experience for individuation, space, time, and matter, that they're stuck, that they can't develop, and so they're stuck in time. So ashes to ashes, dust to dust is their motto, and they take such a convoluted stance and are real loyal to their cause that they just do not want to ascend, do not want to hear anything about it, and they do anything they can to do as much damage as they possibly could to God source, and everyone to stand in alignment with that, which is where they originally came from, by the hand that feeds them, talk about, and they'll just go back as space dust, you know, eventually, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Okay, so yeah, pay attention to the language and the symbolism behind that. I certainly have, and yeah, for me, even though it's kind of like, well, he wanted to roll this out and it be under humanitarian means, it's still kind of coming under the banner of a false savior program with the Alpha and Omega network, okay, which connects into the black hole fauna matrices. Okay, so pinch of salt, discernment, as always, guys, just information, just, adding my 2 cents to this. So inventory list, we've gone through that. So now 1977, re-establishment of El Banco Español offshore capital. Again, this document is basically the Filipino offshore capital banking system agreement with Central Bank of Philippines and El Banco Español. El Banco first established as Bullion Bank in August 1st, 1851, being sole founder of the Central Bank of Philippines, established in January 3rd, 1949. 40% share of stock for the Philippine government, 60% for the El Banco Español Filipino offshore capital. Okay, and then establishing the opening of vault to vault and ledger to ledger with export permit to expand the commercial bank around the world with the Central Bank of Philippines, and the only asset manager held under umbrella account. Okay, there it is again, that account. El Banco Offshore Capital arranged 77 subsidiary banks around the world as part of the bilateral Minesfield Successor Breakthrough Agreement, with 2% interest per annum withdrawal in 2007 for the implementation of the World Master Plan, duly committed during 22 Heads of State Summit held in the UNCTAD, Cancun, Mexico, October 4th, 1982. El Banco allowed to authorize withdrawals and deposits in any affiliate banks around the world where his assets are located. Okay, Tiburcio Villamor Marcos is the sole owner signatory of all accounts lodged in trust, maturity 2007. This certificate gives authority to operate the offshore banking system, reasserts the gold bullion as the principal backup of all legal tender governed by the law treaties, ended in 2007, to end in 2007. Okay, so that's very interesting document there. So we have the 1978 TVM LSM 666 Oath of Office, Supreme Court of the Philippines affirming TVM as Governor General and Commander-in-Chief of H-World United Nations Military Government under Special Provisio, Mortis Causa, effective January 2007. And we have the 1978 Supreme Court issuance of original certificate of title, number T014. Hacienda is Spanish for estate of the Philippine Islands, declaring the last will and testament to vest the Philippine Islands to Tiburcio V. Marcos, the successor and heir. Okay, so this is all coming from Ferdinand y Marcos, vesting it all to this individual TBM, Tiburcio Villamor Marcos. Villamor is the Spanish royal bloodlines, and the Marcos Tilano is kind of tied into the Tilano royal bloodline, I believe. So 1976, Federal Reserve System notice to world central banks, stating they are using TVM LSM 666 asset commodities for the consonants of our objective purposes to back up the currencies, basically maturity, which is 2005. Then we've got the 1980s global agreement, which is quite a long document. So made at UN headquarters in New York, USA, January 10th, 1980, handing over full power of authority to handle, to control, to withdraw, to receive cash at hand, and to claim said assets and properties, as to inherit those for the benefit of the people of the Philippines and the assignee to any of my authorized party, either El Vincent Guc Basalas, identified as a fraudulent trustee mimicking Judge Alfonso Pijao, or only one concerned party. Okay, Queen Elizabeth signs this document. At the top there, you can see 7th, 20th, 89, defining the proportion, which is obviously 20th of July, I guess, 1989, which is a bit weird, defining the proportion of assets shared as that being 50%, okay, which where 50%, so 50-50, then 60-40 for the Committee of 300 and people of the Philippines, then 70% for people of the Philippines and 30% for the Committee of 300. This, I believe, is coming from the interest that's earned from these accounts. So it was agreed that 50-50, so 50% to be used for allocation of 70% for the Philippine people, 30% for the rest of the world, and then 50% reinvested in the principal going forward annually. Okay, then that was changed to 60-40, basically, to apply to that 70-30 principle. Under Agreement 3, it states no one other than the authorized owner heir to the accounts from any of the world authorities is allowed to use those funds for lending or remitting purposes. Section 4 details the maturity of the deposits be released to the people of the Philippines from June the 1st, 2006 to September 1st, 2086, with 70% shared to those people and 30% to the Committee of 300 after September 1st, 2006. Okay, mentions powers to revoke Vincent Guque Bruxelles as trustee, and it lists the certificate of deposits to US Treasury, Wells Fargo and Co. for SAYS certificate, Japanese, Chinese Liberty Bond certificate, Philippine Victory Note certificate, Chase Manhattan Bond certificate, Yugoslavia Treasury, certified with Bank of England, January 14, 1973. And agreements to end martial law in the Philippines and to ensure the rollout of these funds to the people of the Philippines and the world circa 2000 onwards. Okay, so that's basically what this document is saying. And interesting, it's got Almighty Aber Estates Corp printed across each one. Okay, so quite a long list of documents here. Again, you could go through in your own time, otherwise I just summarized. I just took a few screenshots of, again, those same accounts. White Mongolia, Vatican Eagle. Almighty Aber Estate Corp written across all of these documents. More documents list prior agreements to 1980 with deposits held in other accounts and agreements for their maturity and release in the year 2000 to be used to help the world and people of the Philippines. On the 1st of June 1989, Ferdinand E. Marcos cancels the authority of HM Queen Elizabeth as trustee over the assets on January the 1st, 2000, where she was trustee from 1976. It was signed in 1980, so it should be 1980 rather, but stipulating that on the 1st of Jan 2000, then Queen Elizabeth is no longer trustee. So we have the next one is the 1981 certificate of deposit worth 3 trillion uncut US dollars. Just 3 trillion. And 10,000 metric tons of gold. Okay, sheets of dollars that have not been cut into individual bills, deposited with the Bank of England, supposedly. And then we've got the 1982 Trilateral Commission of Global Funders. Okay, so the minutes of special meeting of the G77 in Cancun, Mexico on October 4th, 1982. David Rockefeller mentioned, has a stamp with H World UN Alpha Omega to resolve the rules of trusteeship, amend the bilateral minefield successor breakthrough agreement of El Banco Español Filipino de Isabel II as exporter of gold to foreign countries that will mature on 2009. El Banco Español Filipino offshore capital designated as banking unit of TVM LSM 666. Umbrella code account of TVM AAA01 OA lists Tiburcio Villamor Marcos as bailor, and the second party is bailee, being the banks, okay, who are the keeper of assets and commodities of TVM, which is movable after maturity on 2009. States the restructuring agreement of maturity to change to 2009, after which all assets, commodities and property be returned to Tiburcio Villamor Marcos under the law of ownership, Article 426, 427 and 428. Okay, so whoever this individual is, if it is an individual, the account who's got control of that now effectively owns all of the world's assets. And that's why ever since that date, 2009, the company was dissolved, I believe, under the Panama paper leaks of the ASBLP group of companies. Again, that's why I can't find, that's why I took the website down. We can't find any information really surrounding this guy, TVM, which is obviously linked to the account, so who's controlling that. So it's quite interesting. So after maturity date of 2009, the El Banco Español Filipino de Isabel II as bullion bank and El Banco Español Filipino offshore capital as banking unit of TVM LSM 666, okay, will be the recipient banking unit of all legal tender foreign currencies. All central banks around the world shall continue to be the servicing bank of trust deposits of the same entity, whereas the Foreign Exchange Department of Central Bank is primarily in charge with the proper implementation of the law and other rules and regulations that may be issued from time to time by the Monetary Board Authority after maturity of 2009. Resolved further, this new world legal order, effective 2011 upon the presentation of this document, is authorized absolutely to sign, withdraw, deposit, and otherwise transfer his assets worldwide to finance the H World United Nations Alpha Omega World Peace Community Development Program of Action directs funds to be sued for the economic social order to be used. I think that's when I say to be used for the economic social order. Okay, so that's really fascinating document. Okay, otherwise, showing the trilateral commission of global founders or funders and all the individuals involved, and the bank, right? That the El Banco Español, and how these, this is two banks that supposedly are still in operation, and through them, on the real private side, is what's being used in conjunction and kind of acting as the depository or the bailor, as it were, for all the bailees of all the central banks and private banks listed in that Treasury certificate document of the Committee 300. So it's quite fascinating. But you can see, obviously, the agreements to move the assets, reallocate post 2009, post 2011 to TVM. Okay, so what structure that is in, I don't know. ASBLP is dissolved. And so whoever this individual is, or individuals acting through this individual, which is a bank account, obviously, we don't know. But all we know is it's in the hands of greedy interests, selfish interests, who have not implemented this wealth to uplift humanity. That's clear to be seen. And that looks like a pretty authentic seal, 3D seal imprint. Okay, so that's a very fascinating document. And here just got some of the, whereas in 1945, the League of Nations held in Nairobi, Mexico created the 5 regional level commission, which is UNIDO, UNCTAD, WHO, UNHCR, and Alpha Omega as a project master plan implementer. The conference was made a declaration of intent to borrow and use the assets, mutual trust fund, for the rehabilitation damages caused from World War I and II as the principal agenda of the League of Nations, approved by the President of the Republic of the Philippines, Jose, in coordination with the Captain Pilot Jesus Antonio Cruz Villamor, the uncle of TVM, LSM 666 mandate of the asset, properties, the Code of Quran known as Cruz Villamor Talano's family clan. The conference headed by Viscount Byrie, ex-President Taft, and Charles de Gaulle, General Dwight Eisenhower, United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Premier Minister Chiang Kai-shek of the People's Republic of China, and Chief Legal Counsel of the Code of Quran, Attorney Ferdinand and John Marcos, authorized. So very interesting. So I have the 1982 Letter of Instruction, Adoption of New World Legal Order, letter outlining the use of accounts to finance the ECOSOC 2005 agenda, and outlines the punishment of any trustee bullion bank to refuse to coordinate and follow the rule of banking law of Bellman, and states that bailee, named White and Out, under Veto Act or Embargo Act 1807. So that's where the name's plotted out. Okay, then we've got the 1982 Operation Embargo Act of 1807, Trilateral Commission outlining the terms of the agreement between that account and the rest of the states that will be punishable if not followed. (1983) 600,000 tons of gold assets deposit for the trust asset of that account. Central Bank of the Philippines deposited into that account. 1985, certificate of entitlement and certificate of deposit. For the backup of managerial papers, currency inside and outside the Philippines, approved and recognized by Fund Committee headed by the World Bank and IMF financing institutions. Used Code of Master Plan for Economic and Peace Project Development, observing the maturity date of these assets up to 2006. We have the 1985 HE President Ferdinand E. Marcos last will and testament in favour to HM His Majesty Anthony Santiago Martin. And this is where you can see quite a long list of some of these accounts that ended up in the Treasury certificate document, the Committee of 300. So this is where it says the code names for Ferdinand E. Marcos is known as AAA 777 and Spiritual King Solomon of Israel, general holder of the following assets and properties entrusted to me by the eternal creator for the benefit of the people of the Philippine Islands, to wit, okay, that account number, Spiritual Wonder Boy account, largest account of a lot of zeros, Alpha Omega account, okay, worth unlimited dollars, and list the guaranteed deposits the people of the Philippine Islands are deposited worldwide, and list all the central banks and the amounts sponsored deposited with them, same as Committee of 300 document, and also list the regions where precious commodities are kept and hidden underneath the sea and mountains area of the Philippine Islands of Luzon to the islands of Mindanao, the lands of the Philippines, and authority to manage the accounts. Okay, so yeah, you can see all the lists there. Central bank, this is the list of all the central banks that this account is backing. Which if you look, I think it's pretty much exactly the same as the Committee 300 document, pretty much. Except, this is just the central banks. The Committee 300 document, the Treasury certificate, has also the private banks. So that's obviously where they got the information from. Again, truly fascinating. And these are the different regions again in the Treasury certificate. Recognizing ownership of these assets. Rightful heir and owner. So we've got the certificate of entitlement of special trust deposit and special trust deposit. Special trust deposit inventory list, summary and confirmation of deposit recorded in US Federal, US Treasury, World Bank, and British Archive. List the trust assets, okay, deposited in trust in the Treasury vault of different bullion banks around the world. Maturity 2005. Okay, again, another fascinating document. All these accounts. Banco, Standard Chartered Bank, Bank of the Philippine Islands, United Coconut Planters Bank, Citibank, Allied Bank, Metro Bank, Commerce Bank. And last but no means least on this page is the final compromise agreement, okay, 1988. Which is signed by Ferdinand E. Marcos and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, recognising Marcos's last will and testament, and to ensure no other parties claim the wealth for themselves, which unfortunately has already happened. So what course of action do we have? What remedies do we have in order to change that? Like I said, the only guys that seem to be doing anything about it is these folks. King Solomon Trust. Okay, so we go to the global assets page. So that's literally all the documents under the history page from the website. Global assets page, we've got the 1989 declaration, again just reconfirming the trust decree. We've got the actual Committee of 300 document, okay, that we've already gone through. Then we have the World Assets Access Reserve, which again shows you the flowchart of how it is all structured now and through these agreements. King Solomon United Republic Trust should be in control and everyone underneath the guardians. Okay, but someone's come in to usurp control and not follow the trust decree. We have the World Bank Infinite Bank Statements. Okay, which is again quite interesting, which is in the Treasury certificate as well. But just a little bit more information pertaining to these institutions. All earning again 4% per annum, etc. Again, quite a large document, a lot of pages. You've got Barack Obama's signature there, Pope Benedict, Queen Elizabeth. And this was signed on March 30th of March 2012 at the World Bank headquarters, Washington, D.C. The right-wing parties, the Committee of 300. Okay, it's interesting. So the Committee of 300 unanimously recognized Group of Families and Sacred Blessings, Inc., with Philippine Securities and Exchange Commission as local and legal affiliation of ASBLP Group of Companies. So maybe this organization, Group of Families and Sacred Blessings, Inc., Incorporated might have taken over. Okay, but these guys are otherwise, look, King ASM was disallowed to visit and go within any banking, right, and financial institutions worldwide without any official legal invitation from the bank and or from the host government. The bank and the host government, through the host government representative, should carefully discuss and finalise the approved monetary value arranged by the bank and the host government, supervision of the Committee of 300. The actual current tear sheet are no longer allowed to entertain it if it will disembark from different under personnel of the Committee of 300, and to be given to and reaffirmed by King ASM, but should be directly issued by the bank and the host government, and King ASM should be furnished only a copy, and this is to warn King ASM that he is no longer allowed to sign in any papers such as contract of agreement, power of attorneys, and other related documentary deal to anybody who is not connected and involved to the host government and never recognised by their embassy in the US Philippine government. Okay, so that all mystified documents aforementioned President E. Marcos as collectively given to King ASM are forever reconsidered and affirmed. So again, these are some of the stipulations of the approval for documentary instruments and standard protocol for processing and activating any of these accounts should be observed and applied as re-lem. Okay, and this is otherwise what they go through and break down with the notice to fiduciaries. So this is obviously the latest agreement that these guys formalized to start twisting the facts, right? That this document here scrutinizes, and this is where I think it's from this document that they really start to turn the screw to change who gets to control the ownership of these accounts and for what purpose. Okay, and you can see there's over 884 accounts that are listed here. That's otherwise again outlined in the Treasury certificate. So it's a lot of accounts, and this is kind of trying to redefine the terms as to who and how these funds should be used. Okay, so when you read through this, you'll see that this is otherwise scrutinizing that document, which is kind of the latest publicized document relating to the agreement surrounding this trust and global assets with this trust indenture and trust decree. Okay, and I'm just going to go through because I made notes on this really quick. So this notice to all fiduciaries, notice of successor trustee to all fiduciaries and entities embraced by the Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve Code. It is a letter notifying all agencies, okay, the bullion banks who were signed up to the original agreement to release funds to the Philippines and the world as per the last will and testament of Ferdinand Marcos, who refused to coordinate and violated the agreement seeking punishment through the International Court for not complying with the mutual agreement. Outlining the new holder of the Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve is King Solomon United Republic Trust, Tribal Republic Trust. States the coded flat account is deposited in 57 banks located in 33 countries with a total of 300 dodecalions, okay, which is 300 plus 33 zeros. This is just one of the wealth held in trust. There are more accounts, and not all the central banks and financial institutions worldwide are indebted to the Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve Code. All the accounts under the Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve Code are infinite accounts. The interest alone is more than enough to finance whatever humanitarian projects we have for humanity. All the assets are under the gift of love. Okay, and after the grantors died, mortis causa, automatically the discretionary power and authority to move all the assets and property shifted immediately to the successor trustee after the maturity date year of 2005. Claims the Treaty of League of Nations is written in simple English, but also in parables. There is a hidden mystery to hide and protect the assets in trust from false claimants, greedy criminals, corrupt, barbaric minds, and no intention for the economic development for the world, but only for self-gain and self-interest. Mentions the Aquarius 777 account. It's interesting because there's a lot of code in the 777 related to the turn of this age, with what's unfolding from many different angles, but one of which is definitely linked to Aquarius, which is interesting because Saturn is the seventh planet, which links into the seventh universal stargate of Arcturus, which links into the fail-safe for the D-span gates of the 777, internal eternal reality domains, with what's unfolding, as well as even Bill Turner stating one of his lectures right from New Zealand that the New Testament would be in the New Testament was the age of Pisces, sun in the age of Pisces. The Old Testament was the sun in the age of Moses, Aries, right? Moses. We're about to end the age of Pisces, which will be now the Old Testament. So the New Testament coming forward is the age of Aquarius. And he mentioned that there's, through a friend of a friend, he heard that there's books already written. There's 777 books, which is the rule book to define this age of Aquarius, right? But again, he just re-emphasizes it's been this long for the new order to fight off the old order to roll out the so-called new age, right? Which is so-called under the age of love, truth, enlightenment, which is what the whole plan was with this Christos realignment mission. This invisible war all went to plan, but unfortunately it hasn't. But it is coming. I can feel it. It's definitely coming. I mean, I'm testament to that fact. I see it within my own personal evolution and growth and the things I'm coming into. And it is slowly, it's a slow burner, but it's certainly shifting. And I think it's one that's kind of spreading through individuals. And we're not looking really for anything outside, but it's all coming through within us all in order to lead us back into remembering. And that happens when you activate your DNA. Everything becomes more aware, conscious of what's going on, and everything that's been hidden in the shadows comes to light again. Okay, so that's quite an interesting synchronicity with the 777 in this age and what's kind of unfolding. So the trust created was a blind trust and complex trust. Accounts earning, obviously, 4% per annum, where 50% of the interest is allowed to be used for humanitarian projects and the other 50% added back to the principal. Also states the guardians of wealth held in trust are the following entities: Board of Governor of the Federal Reserve System, United States Treasury, World Bank, and International Monetary Fund. These are the entities assigned to help the successor trustee after the maturity date of time deposit in the year 2005. The guardians are the caretaker and not the owner of the accounts. The power and authority belong to the successor or trustee. The Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve Code is backed with gold, diamonds, platinum, and lands. There are 884 accounts listed by the Committee of 300 in the World Bank. Okay, gives link to document share file, but no longer works. I think that was otherwise, as you can see, if we go down. Yeah, I haven't been able to bring this up. Okay, so whether they actually mention any of the documents in here remains to be seen, but they've got a link to their website. There doesn't seem to be any reference to that document. Okay, but otherwise, some of the terms here that this document is scrutinizing the agreements of. So there are 884 accounts, okay, by the Committee of 300, the World Bank Group gives a link to the documents. It then goes to comment on extracted quotes made by the World Bank Group through the Committee of 300, scrutinizing and exposing the claims being made by this group as fraudulently twisting facts surrounding the trust in order to justify robbing control of its assets. King ASM is only a code used to protect the assets held in trust. King ASM is code for President Ferdinand Marcos. The statements is actually twisting and trying to move or shift authority and power to decide to the government officials. It is not in accord with the original Treaty of Nations. Okay, so these guys are pretty clear in claiming that King ASM is just a code for President Ferdinand Marcos. It's not an actual individual, so-called fourth grandson. Okay, so King ASM is just a code and given another code to protect all the assets and trust. All documents are mystified, meaning there is a mystery hidden under cloaked for secrecy to protect the assets from the hands of the greedy. We all know that stands for New Organization of the People of the Philippines. Okay, mentions the Bible, Isaiah 43:5, fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your descendants from the east and gather yours from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. This is the wealth for the world, gathered from different corners of the world, from the east and from the west, from the north to the south. All the wealth for humanity combined together in one trust, the Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve Code. The world has no end because it is round. It's quite interesting. And it just goes into some research I did about the origin of the massive Christian influence, okay, with the founding of this huge Christian denomination church in the Philippines back in 1914. Right, so we have the other final kind of page. It's worth going through. Is otherwise here, which again is the trust decree outlining orders of compliance pursuant to Phoenix Operator Owner Manual, which is quite interesting. Now, this Phoenix Operator Owner Manual is an interesting one, okay, including flight instructions, if used properly, 1,000-year warranty, 144,000 planets tested, manufacturer Aton, maintenance service authorized instructors Jesus and Anda, Lord Michael and Saint Germain. As you can see, it's a bit strange, but this particular individual has multiple other published PDFs related to kind of a bit, in my opinion, woolly and not really too clear mystical teachings that is more in alignment with I think the Yahweh collective of the fallen Anu Elohim consciousness of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which goes into that patriarchal slant of the Church of Rome with what they implemented, rather than the true eternal God source first eternal trinity of the androgen still point. And then from that you have the electric masculine oscillation light and divine feminine vibration sound of magnetism, which together form the trinity. Okay, and they're both equal, right? So the so-called trinity that's been perpetrated in modern day theology doesn't have the mother, the divine feminine aspect of magnetism and vibration in there. Okay, it's taken it out because it's using it to control the gestation chambers and the breeders and the stargates of souls to come into realms in order for them to control the bloodlines. But otherwise, it has like an index at the bottom of this document. Okay, this is what I mean. The Alpha and Omega is still connected into competing for an angelic legions. So that's why I'm a little bit with this, hesitant to say whether it's a good thing or not. But certainly, what's a bank account at the end of the day? What's money? At the end of the day, what's gold, platinum, silver, diamonds? They're innate objects. They don't think anything of us. They're just tools and mediums. So what defines whether it's being used for good or bad is the person using it. Okay, so certainly there can be individuals that can step in and have the right intent in order to use it for humanitarian purposes, right? And that's what we've got to focus on. So it's all there. They're just tools at the end of the day. And it's just a matter of, fascinating story to get behind, to share, and to encourage people to kind of put pressure on these guys, write letters into these guys, send emails into these guys, email these folks, the website, how can we help? What's going on? What's the latest? Okay, but like I said, also never dismiss the fact that it could all just be a psyop and a ruse to entertain, again, the white hat movement to get people to sit on their hands and do nothing. Okay, when in actuality, the answer is each and every one of us coming up to the level of being sovereign, being independent, becoming educated, taking responsibility and being accountable. Okay. And so again, the trust decree, uniform commercial codes, adoption of the universal commercial code as the law of the trust, and that the trust has only the sole authority and power to amend from time to time any and all provisions of the UTC pursuant to the general executive powers of the trust. Okay, so it lists quite a hefty document about the UCC. Okay, going through articles 1 to 9, I believe. Okay, that's also on their website. All right, so that's pretty much their whole website listed in detail. Now, I came across an interesting Instagram account that this woman was kind of like posting some documents relating to King Tiburcio Villamor Marcos, who's an actual being here with the left mole on his cheek and a birthmark on his neck, which some of these documents outline the requirements in order to receive deposits and confirm authenticity of the signee of the bank accounts to take control must have these qualities present in their biology that this woman's kind of collating and putting together. So the code name of Judge Pajau is a designated code name for King Leo Tiburcio Villamor Marcos, supposedly. Codename Sultan Muhammad, okay, his kingdom was just a code, as you can see. And she otherwise says that this individual as well, so real King Leo, TVM with the mole on his left side, the sign, security trace of the White Spiritual Boy account and Spiritual Wonder Boy accounts of HSM Anthony Santiago Martins, apparently this fella. HM Tiburcio Villamor Marcos, King of England, head of heads. And this is the imposter king fraud. Okay, if you actually Google this individual, this guy, you kind of link to this guy more often than not. And then this woman, from the Royal Crown of Hacienda. Good news, everyone. We are now having emergency relief funds to each Filipino given away from our World Interpol dollars each family in honor of King Leo and his father, Ferdinand Marcos. So please support our President Jr. to make Philippines great again, starting May 5th, 2025, to secure your family. Court order prevail. Thank you. From Her Royal Highness Governor General Edna Ardeles Franco. Okay, so not really too sure what's going on with this, but again, interesting how just looking at the coding, the symbolism behind this individual and what she's posting on Facebook with the 777, right? The guardian of the Triple Crown flame. heir of the Vault Law titles, witness and custodian of the Logos Descent 888, which again is quite interesting because that goes into the shift that's underway with the 888 Whisper Spam gates under arheus.com with the latest mission upgrades and dispensations of the Invisible War drama that's going on with this failsafe. That's underway, the separating of wheat from the chaff. Okay, so certainly an interesting story to kind of still keep tabs on. I certainly will be watching this space and seeing if there's any reply from these guys, which currently, as yet, I've not received for a few emails that I've sent out to them. So next on the list for us to go through is just this little document, okay, relating to the history that I've highlighted. Okay, that we'll just quickly skim through. Again, I'll leave a link down below in a Dropbox link for you guys to access some of these documents. This is otherwise on Script D. Okay, a little bit of history about Ferdinand Marcos, the 10th president, etc. We're just going to read what's highlighted to save time. So it's already been 2 hours now, this presentation. So the wartime activities. The war left the Philippines scarred, with fierce battles fought across its islands. Amid the chaos, okay, significant treasures were reported looted by the Japanese military, including those linked to the infamous Golden Lily operation. These treasures, originally believed to belong to the pre-Hispanic rulers of the Philippines, were later the subject of international disputes. The International Court eventually ruled that these assets, including certified deposits, were intended for the benefit of the Philippine people. This ruling reaffirmed that such wealth, regardless of its origins, was to be used for the nation's development. Additionally, post-war reparations and projects between Japan and the Philippines, including various Field Japan initiatives, demonstrated Japan's efforts to atone for wartime damages. Okay, remember, this goes into the Axis powers gaining control of some of these treasures during that period. Marcos's connection to these events and his later involvement in treasure recovery efforts remain controversial. Nonetheless, these efforts were often framed as a means to restore wealth to the Filipino people and rebuild the nation from the ashes of the war. So the treasure hunting and historical claims. In 1980, treasure hunters were permitted by the undersigned to search for treasures believed to be linked to King Luisong, the legendary figure from whom Luzon is said to have derived its name, and Dr. Jose Rizal, the Philippines' national hero. According to law, these treasures were designated for the benefit of the Filipino people and have been identified and recognized by the International Court. The narrative surrounding Dr. Jose Rizal includes a controversial and widely debated theory. It is believed by some that Rizal, who was supposedly executed in Begum Bayan, okay, now Luneta Park, was not actually killed. Instead, the Spaniards allegedly staged his execution using blank bullets to preserve his life due to his immense wealth. Rizal was then reportedly taken to the Vatican, where he was ordained as a priest under the name Father Jose Antonio Diaz, with his burial in Paco Cemetery, Milia Ruz. King Luisong's gold had reportedly been placed in a blind trust at the Vatican, as was half of Rizal's wealth, deposited under the name Jose Potenciano Mercado in Chase National Bank. Rizal, now as Father Jose Antonio Diaz, later hired his nephew Ferdinand Marcos to serve as his legal counsel in reclaiming King Luisong's gold through the International Court. Okay, so now here they're referring to Rizal as the uncle of Jose Antonio rather than the great-grandfather. Okay, either way, they seem to be related. The case was won, but the Vatican returned only 30% of the total gold volume. This amount was then split in half, honouring King Luisong's dying request that if the gold were recovered, it would belong to Father Jose Antonio Diaz. These claims, though lacking concrete evidence, are deeply embedded in Filipino historical folklore and continue to intrigue many. Well, it's certainly been true because we've got evidence to show it is from the United Nations, the Committee of 300 document acting through the United Nations and the international courts to affirm that fact and tell us a brief snapshot of the history. So, acquisition of the Philippine Islands. In 1976, a significant transaction reportedly occurred involving the purchase of the Philippine Islands under original certificate title, okay, based on survey plan, covering a total area of 451,000 square kilometers from Luzon to Sabah. This title was registered under Land Registration Act number 496, adhering to provisions ratified between the United States of America and Spain. The agreement, dated December 10th, 1879, and held in Paris, France, valued the islands at 20 billion, far exceeding the original price of 100 million initially set by American authorities. It is claimed that Ferdinand Marcos personally financed the acquisition from his own resources, a fact unknown to many. This act contributed to his recognition as one of the world's wealthiest individuals during that time. The purchase was formalized under a federal agreement executed between President Gerald Ford and Ferdinand Marcos at the White House in Washington, D.C. See, because he had access to all that wealth. The agreement included provisions acknowledging the recovery of lost assets and properties by Marcos, which were identified as the assets and properties of the Filipino people. These assets were believed to trace back to King Luisong, a legendary figure also associated with the story Bernard o Carpio in Philippine folklore. This transaction underscored the intent to secure the wealth and resources of the Philippines for the benefit of its citizens. Now, this gives another fascinating insight that's just come to me as to why they're doing what they're doing at the birth, in order to remove us as beneficiaries and declare us dead. So then all the individuals that hoard all this wealth cannot and will not distribute to individuals willingly stepping up to play dead and forego our rights to be living beneficiaries and heirs as the people declared under this last will and testament of Ferdinand E. Marcos to receive the benefits of the trust of all these global assets, okay, which obviously makes sense if you think about it right from the root. How do you remove people from being able to access this insane amount of wealth? Well, you trap them and you walk them from the land into the water, floated as dead fictional entities, and acting as surety for that. So if they agree to play dead under this legal fiction, then there's no right for them as trustees to distribute the benefits and the assets of the trust as beneficiaries, because there's none present. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense, right? So the Alpha Omega Ring, gold trust and political upheaval. The undersigned, together with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II of England, held discussions at Buckingham Palace, London. During this meeting, the undersigned entrusted the Queen with the ancient Alpha Omega Ring and 1 million metric tons of gold placed into a blind trust. Additional agreements were made between the undersigned, the United Nations Organization, and the Committee of 300 during a meeting of the United Nations headquarters in New York, USA. So at the time, the undersigned was believed to have used a code name, Judge Pijao, one of 7 alternate personas created for security purposes. Between 1979 and 1986, Ferdinand Marcos often gave speeches and appeared publicly under these aliases. However, after these engagements, the persona would act independently. The undersigned claims to have been unaware of the misdeeds of Judge Pijao, including a secret deal to borrow $40 million from the World Bank Group without proper authorization, which doesn't make sense if that was the code name he was using. Anyway, so despite these challenges, the undersigned, so this is the abuse of power and legacy of the trust. Okay, the undersigned executed a series of legal documents ensuring that assets and properties under their control would prioritize the Filipino people's welfare. These assets were also intended to fund worldwide humanitarian projects. To safeguard these intentions, the undersigned, as the original signatory, executed a deed of assignment, designating their sole heiress signatory, Golden Butterfly, also referred to as the original White Spiritual Wonder Boy, as the administrator, signatory, and key to these assets and properties. Again, prioritize for the global humanitarian efforts. General intention: the funds, upon maturing in the year 2000 and beyond, are designated to support various development programs for the benefit of the Filipino people as a priority, while also promoting humanitarian projects worldwide. Again, like I said, we're yet to see that. So unfortunately, it has been usurped due to various different means, one of which I think is declaring us all dead at birth. So we can't be seen or heard, floated as dead fictional entities on paper, acting as surety and agent for, but also probably other tricks and traps involving, these elite aristocratic interest groups that not all of them would be, serving the self-interest and anti-Christic kind of agendas, but certainly would be individuals that, would want to roll out the Christic kind of timeline of manifesting heaven on earth and bringing everything up to a level playing field for humanity to end, wars, poverty, inequality, etc. So just have to watch this space to see how this manifests and rolls out. Like I said, each and every one of us here can, help put pressure in raising awareness, first and foremost, of the agreement, and then 100th monkey effect. If more and more of us, you could be that 100th monkey that tips over the edge, collective consciousness, tipping point, things start changing, pressures put on the governments and those folks in power who are susceptible to hearing the story and, more aligned with the Christ than the anti-Christ, certainly would start taking action and the information will start spreading to the right minds and hands of individuals within this structure already waiting to be rolled out. Hit the switch and let's go. Let's implement. Let's get rid of all the charlatans, the usurpers, the greedy, self-interested parties, and roll out heaven on earth, basically. So the resurvey of the lands to ensure the legal occupation of the Philippines by the United States happens. Okay, under that agreement, the resurvey confirmed the island's total area of approximately 451,000 square kilometers, extending from Luzon to Sabah, as we've gone through, etc., etc. The Axis powers horrified the world, looting treasures across Europe, many of which were believed to be remnants of King Louisong's wealth and assets preserved by Dr. Jose Rizal. Among these was the Alpha Omega ring, safeguarded in Madrid, alongside other treasures deposited under a White Vatican account. After Rizal staged execution in Lunita, he was allegedly taken by the Spanish to the Vatican and became a priest under the name Father Jose Antonio Diaz. During World War II, these treasures, under the supervision of General Tomoyuki Yamashita, were secretly transported to the Philippine Islands. Unbeknownst to the Filipino people, the treasures were hidden across the archipelago, further entwining the nation's history with legends of immense wealth and global intrigue. General Tomoyuki Yamashita played a significant and enigmatic role in Philippine history, particularly during the regime of Ferdinand Emmanuel Marcos. Yamashita, who reportedly declared himself dead to escape persecution, adopted the alias Judge Alfonso Pijao. Okay, so that's where it comes in. That's interesting. One of the many code names utilized by the Marcos trusted confidants, known by the code name Patapok for security reasons. Yamashita became one of the 6 faces created by Marcos to act as his public personas, with the 7th face being Marcos himself. How interesting. This strategy was devised for FEM security, allowing him to alternate between these identities during his presidency. From 1970 to 1983, Yamashita, under the identity of Judge Pijao, was entrusted to sit in the presidency during public engagements, while Marcos focused on critical matters, such as managing and securing the time-locked deposits of wealth. These treasures included stocks of precious metals and commodities amassed by King Louisong, known in legend as Bernardo Caprio, and Dr. Jose Rizal, as well as assets looted during World War II by Golden Lily, the code name for the Japanese imperial looting operation. General Yamashita himself was tasked with hiding these treasures in various locations throughout the Philippines to ensure their safekeeping. This wealth was intended to benefit the Filipino people as prime beneficiaries and to support global humanitarian projects, reflecting Marcos's vision for development. After World War II, some unrecovered treasures hidden by the Axis powers remained concealed in the mountainous regions and undersea locations of the Philippine Islands. These treasures were deemed untouchable, unrecoverable, and reserved to sponsor the maturities of multiple certified deposits executed by the undersigned. These deposits were intended to benefit the Filipino people as prime beneficiaries, as well as promote humanitarian programs worldwide. They also include deserving beneficiaries worldwide, particularly in the countries where the deposits are stored. The aim was to create a sustainable source of funding to uplift lives and initiate programs of global significance. Following the war, UN case number 4136 addressed claims over the alleged looted and lost treasures of the Axis powers. These treasures were reconsidered and reconfirmed by the International Court of Justice as assets and properties belonging to King Louisong, widely known in legend as Bernardo Carpio. That's probably an error I made. I think I referred to him as Caprio. It's meant to be Carpio. And Dr. Jose Rizal, which again, he mentions here, the great-grandfather of the undersigned. Okay, in contradistinction to him as being the uncle. Okay, but anyway, they're related, that's all that matters. The ICJ gave claimant nations a 30-year time frame to hunt, retrieve, and recover these treasures for the benefit of their respective countries. The Alpha Omega ring, along with maps indicating the locations of treasures belonging to King Louisong, widely known in legend as Bernard Carpio and Dr. Jose Rizal, was handed over to the undersigned. These items were surrounded by General Tomoyuki Yamashita and successfully obtained by Lucia Mercado Rizal, also known as Lucio Potenciano Mercado, Maria Maymorno M. Reyes, or Maria Makiling, one of Dr. Jose Rizal's siblings, believed to have passed away in 1919, which led to her adopting a different name. Okay, she was also identified as Queen Esther of Persia and Israel. The undersigned subsequently secured the presidency on November 30th, 1965, during which time the treasures were deposited in various banks across Europe, Asia, and America, including the World Bank Group. The undersigned defended their rightful claim to these treasures through international court rulings, appointing the Lectuna Maria Banahor, the Lady Shaman at Mount Banahor in Queensland Province, also known as the spiritual delighter, as a trustee. Historically, during the rise of the Mongol Empire, this is where obviously the history lines up, 1206 to 1294, aided by the Philippines' treasures, Mongolia expanded its dominion, conquering lands across Asia, the Holy Land, Eastern Europe, and parts of the American continent. These conquests brought unpredictable shifts in global power as the Mongols dominated vast territories across the Asian region. Despite their initial success, their empire began to decline by the 1290s, leaving behind significant documents of King Luosong in China. This paved the way for Western civilizations to expand their influence and invade territories beyond their domains, reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the world. Spain was one of the leading European nations in expeditions and conquests beyond its borders, initially targeting Latin America and later the Philippine Islands. During these expeditions, Spain, alongside other European powers, acquired treasures believed to have originated from Mongolian raiders. These treasures are knowingly influenced and partly composed of the wealth of King Luosong, widely known in legend as Bernard Capio, just to hit that home, in case you guys don't know by now, were instrumental in financing European invasions outside their continent. In the Philippines, Spain secured an agreement through deception, creating a pact between King Sicatuna and King Sagala of Bohol and General Lopez de Legazpi of Spain and Mexico, dated March 16, 1565. This pact allowed Spain to recover portions of King Luosong's treasures in Bohol province, believed to have been safeguarded by Melecta Bali or Maria Cristina. These treasures, later associated with Maria Cristina falls in Mindanao, became part of the undersigned certified deposits in a major American bank. Eventually, Dr. Joseph Rizal, often referred to as the spiritual prophet of Moses and the spiritual David, emerged as a guiding figure believed to have been sent by the great creator to lead the Filipinos toward redemption and renewal. Young Dr. Jose Rizal began his academic journey at the University of Santo Tomas, but his time there was marked by suffering, unfairness, and distress due to the harsh treatment of the Spanish dean and priests. During this period, he encountered Maria Clara del Prado, who symbolized the spiritual transfer of power from Maria Banahor. She entrusted him with the Alpha Omega ring and left him a critical message to recover the documents of King Luosong, believed in legend to be Bernard Caprio or King Caprio, from the custody of Chinese Emperor Guangxu. So determined, Dr. Joseph Rizal traveled to Hong Kong, where Emperor Guangxu was visiting. Rizal succeeded in obtaining King Luosong's documents from their keepers. From Hong Kong, he embarked on a journey through major European cities, including Madrid, Vienna, London, Paris, and Berlin, carrying with him some of King Luosong's gold deposits and documents. Upon his return to the Philippines, Rizal faced persecution by the Spanish rulers, who sought to undermine him because of his growing influence and wealth. This culminated in his staged execution on December 13, 1896. Unknown to the public, the execution was a Moro, a stage event. The gunshots used blank bullets, and his supposed burial in Paco Cemetery was fabricated. In reality, Rizal was taken to the Vatican, where he was made a priest under the name Father Jose Antonio Diaz. This allowed the Spanish authorities to maintain control while protecting the immense wealth Rizal owned, including King Luosong's treasures. Rizal's death was a carefully orchestrated event kept secret, even from many within the Spanish regime. Let's just get a review. Dr. Jose Rizal entrusted the vast treasures of King Luosong, widely known, to benefit the Filipino people of the Philippine Islands. These treasures were placed in blind trust not only in America but also in Europe, with Rizal serving as the trustee. He passed this responsibility to Maria Mercado Rizal, also known as Maria Potenciano Mercado, Maria Efiana M. Coronado Castellanos, or Maria Sinicoan, one of his siblings, who was also spiritually regarded as Saint Mary, the maternal figure of Jesus. Following Rizal's orchestrated death, the people of the Philippine Islands united to revolt against Spanish colonial rule. This culminated in the Declaration of Independence on June 12, 1898, as Filipino revolutionaries fought to overthrow Spanish forces. However, after the Spanish defeat, American authorities entered the islands claiming sovereignty through the Treaty of Paris. Signed on December 10, 1898, the Treaty of Paris formalized Spain's cession of the Philippine Islands to the United States of America for $20 million American dollars. Included in this agreement was an old Philippine map printed by King Louison, symbolizing the island's immense historical and cultural significance. The map in question, titled Titulo de Propiedad Número 4136, has been referenced repeatedly throughout history because the American authorities reoccupied the Philippine Islands using this map, which was part of the Treaty of Paris signed on December 30th, 1898, between the United States and Spain. This treaty, which took place in Paris, France, was based on an ancient map printed during the time of King Louison, widely known in legend as Bernardo Caprio, King Caprio. The islands, originally obtained through deceit by the Spanish colonial forces, were later purchased by Dr. Jose Rizal and subsequently illegally sold by the Spanish to the United States. In an even more controversial act, General Emilio Aguinaldo also sold the islands to US authorities. Eventually, the undersigned acquired, so I'm not too sure about what's going on there with like the selling back and forth. Okay, but eventually the undersigned President, Ferdinand Marcos acquired the islands from the United States for 20 million, or 10,000 metric tons of gold bars, which were inherited from his father and preserved beneath the World Trade Center in the New York City, USA. These events were, so this is going into the history of wealth. These events were part of a channel destiny tied to King Louison, widely recognized as King Bernardo Caprio, or spiritual judge Samson of Israel, who left a testimony regarding the treasures in the Philippine Islands. This testimony included documents of legal deposits under the White Mongolian account and the Alpha Omega ring, along with ancient texts from the eras of Adam, Noah, Prophet Moses, Judge Samson, King David, and King Solomon of Israel. The undersigned identified under the account name Anthony Santiago Martin, also Ferdinand Emmanuel John Marcos, or Ferdinand John Marcos, and bearing many international code names such as Spiritual Wonder Boy, White Spiritual Boy, Femo One, and Spiritual King David of Israel, was the father of Maria Nuvi, Ferdinand Da, MJE, Maria Josefa Dangwa, Chua Josefa Dangwa Chua. It is stated that before King Louison offered his sacrifice to block the rolling stones of Mount Sierra in Mount Alban and the nearby town of Rodriguez, Rizal province, he secured and entrusted the most precious wealth and treasures of Queen Bathsheba and Maria Cristina. These treasures were handed over to Dr. Jose Rizal with specific instructions to claim and protect them as they had been deposited in foreign countries. King Louison ensured that these treasures were preserved for the benefit of the Filipino people, intending them to support the nation's prosperity. He left them as a legacy to sustain and maintain the daily needs and demands of agricultural workers, underscoring his dedication to the welfare of the Philippine population. So fascinating document. So we've got the designated sole heiress. Here we have this individual, Maria Nuvi Ferdinanda, also known as Maria Josefa Emanuela Dangwachua, the Golden Butterfly. She is assigned under 11 account names, 17 account code names, and 17 code aliases, with 4 registered birthdays across 3 different years, used exclusively for account records. This is where I got the information and the recognition that these guys do use multiple aliases and actual registered certificate of live births, which goes into probably the whole reason why the Committee of 300 document, as we see here, utilized the certificate of live birth that was linked to probably Ferdinand E. Marcos, that otherwise reconfirmed the existence of this account, in this case, Anthony Santiago Martin. So this could very well be just a bank account, that's otherwise linked to the owner. Which this otherwise gives us hints as to what's going on. She's assigned under 11 account names, 17 account code names, and 17 code aliases with 4 registered birthdays across 3 different years, used exclusively for account records. So they can do it probably as many times as they need or see to deemed fit as to what they're managing with their estate and the assets. So I find that very fascinating, that we are so conditioned to think our birth is just linked to the individual, right? And at least now with this example, we see that on the private side, certificate of live birth, public side, our birth certificates, done the forensics on that, watch my presentation on YouTube and on my website, Sovereignty in Law, that every single person that's otherwise not born with a certificate of live birth is declared a stillborn who died without a will intestate, who be with a criminal charge and made collateral for all of the debt. And that removes us as being recognised as a beneficiary and part of we the people who could reap the benefits of all this vast amounts of wealth on the private side. Okay, so the private side is where the remedy is. All right, and so they can set up multiple certificate of live births, because what do you need when you go to open up a bank account? Your birth certificate. Okay, it's the requirement of this system in order to get your foot in the door to the world of commerce, okay, which is operating on planet Earth at this moment. Okay, it's the chief boss, the chief religion, the moonitary system, the moon eye, going into the moonarchy and the moonopoly, okay, the one that rules them all, one that rules many, on a moon day, which is where they have the bank holidays to show you that everything closes down. Everyone goes to worship and venerate the money, the banks, the moon eye, the moon, okay, on a Monday, because everything's bank holiday, look what happens, everything closes. No way can really function without it, even though in this day and age it's a lot easier. But you get the point. Okay, so fascinating document. I mean, I guess I came at it at the right time. I was thinking to myself, how did I go through this earlier? Okay, but such is the nature of this journey, right? Of trials and tribulations, new levels, new devils, the accretion process. I had to build up the accretion, right? The frequency in order for me to sit down in front of this document and go through and receive and hash out and mine the information and the full story of what's happening with this. Okay, so it's truly fascinating. So I just got highlighted here to finish off with authorized representative, got the 11 account names of Ferdinand Emmanuel John Marcos, encompassing his aliases and code names such as King Anthony Santiago Martin. So there you go. Again, another approval that it's all linked to the same individual. Historical lineage connection, Maria Nuvi Ferdinanda. Again, this individual is direct descendant of Dr. Jose Rizal, also known as Father Jose Antonio Diaz. This lineage validates her designation as the administrator and signatory of JPM accounts. Dr. Jose Rizal entrusted Ferdinand John Marcos with the authority to retrieve his wealth from various parts of the world with a condition. Maria Nuvi Ferdinanda would be the key and administrator signatory to all retrieved wealth. Key role during the Marcos regime. Okay, this is this individual here. She was actively involved in critical operations, including handling deliveries during the Marcos regime, managing designated bunkers and accounts. Her unique lineage, authority, and trusted roles solidify her position as the sole heiress, a signatory ensuring the proper administration of assets for the benefit of all beneficiaries. The undersigned recounts the prophetic instructions and extraordinary circumstances surrounding the birth of his daughter. Okay, this is otherwise goes into prophecy. And we have here Maria Josefa Emmanuel Dangwachua, also known by various aliases, rose to prominence as the creator and representative of the Triple M accounts and Triple J accounts. Her exceptional capabilities and divine-like qualities earned her the following responsibilities and titles. Okay, and you got here signatory administrator of critical global accounts, including the Alpha Omega accounts, authorized trustee, signatory administrator for her father's accounts on the Committee of 300. Okay, wonder child, etc., etc. So, yeah, very interesting. Her titles and responsibilities reflect her pivotal role in safeguarding and managing a legacy of wealth and influence. Okay, whether it ties into this individual, I do not know. Okay, but there's certainly something going on. Something going on that's brewing. Otherwise, I would not have come into this information. And it's pretty hopeful. It's pretty hopeful. So there is a shift happening, and I'm feeling it. And I'm seeing it within the timeline that those, as the wheat has been separated from the chaff with the two timelines, the anti-Christic timeline, the Christic timeline, black hole fall timeline, return of space dust, and the organic eternal ascension. There's got to be a period of time which is going to accommodate for the rapid evolution of souls to come back up and into, our avatar selves again, of activating our 12 substrand DNA. And that requires a very humanitarian, Christic governance and system in order to get us to that point where we are back in a realm which is very much fluid, very reactive to our consciousness. We can pretty much manifest. There won't be any real need for money. anymore, and it'd just be completely different. Okay, so fascinating story. We've got another document here that otherwise has like a UCC filing from this individual, Jose Antonio Diaz, Saint Romana, back in 2019. Okay, so relatively recently, which is highlighting this document, putting a lean against it, which is quite interesting. So whether that's an inside look as to maybe what's going on behind the scenes that this organization is fronting in regards to trying to hold these folks accountable when following the trust decree, the trust indenture, recognizing these facts that these guys have usurped the agreement and are in breach of trust. Okay, so truly fascinating. All right, so the last document, I won't actually go through it because it's already 2 hours and 30 minutes. But this is otherwise a good document on script-D that I downloaded. That's otherwise just highlighted. I might as well just read a few bits out of it. Okay, we come this far. It's not many pages. All right, so this is about the Committee of 300, as we know. 300 men, all of whom know one another, direct the economic destiny of Europe and chose their successors from among themselves. Okay, that's from Walter Rathenau, 1909, founder of the mammoth German General Electric Corporation. So let's just zoom in a bit. So the Committee of 300 is a product of the British East India Company's Council of 300. The East India Company was chartered by the British royal family in 1600. It made vast fortunes in the opium drug trade with China and became the largest company on earth in its time. Today, through many powerful alliances, the Committee of 300 rules the world and is the driving force behind the criminal agenda to create a new world order under totalitarian global government. There is no need to use they or the enemy, except as shorthand. We know who they, the enemy, is. The Committee of 300, with its aristocracy, its ownership of the US Federal Reserve banking system, insurance companies, giant corporations, foundations, communications networks, presided over by a hierarchy of conspirators, this is the enemy. Secret societies exist by deception. Each is a hierarchy within an inner circle at the top, who deceives those below with lies such as claiming a noble agenda, thus duping them into following a web of compartmentalized complicity. The inner circle of the Committee of 300 is the Order of the Garter, headed by Queen Elizabeth Windsor II. It is interesting to note that the Windsors changed their name from the German Saxe-Coburg Gotha during World War I because of anti-German sentiment. Again, this is what I mean. This is why I got to say one view of all this could be just a disguise for humanitarian means in which these folks are just putting up as a front. Okay, and that's otherwise the deception, unfortunately, of these folks. And just recollect to show this in the first presentation. Committee 300 is there, Illuminati, secret societies. They manage all this. Okay, and everything there as well. Secret societies there, think tanks. And then above them, there's more, and then there's more going off world. Okay, so it's a big club. We ain't in it, but unfortunately, we're on the right side of history because we are in alignment with God's source for us eternal. If you're on the path of wanting to activate your 12 substrand DNA, coming to the truth, remember who you are as a guardian, human angelic, okay, created as an eternal being, and we poured ourselves into these fallen systems to help regenerate. Other fallen beings want on the way back to heal and combat the darkness and bring light into the darkness. And we are so much more powerful than these folks when fully activated, which is why they do what they do, run the clock 24/7 to suppress us, oppress us, because they know if enough of us wake up, they are fucked. Okay, and I think they already know that. I certainly know, again, talking from first-hand experience, my journey of what I've gone through, what I've been able to resist and persist through and grow stronger as a result of, things are definitely shifting for the better. Okay, so he continues, this author, the enemy is clearly identifiable as the Committee of 300 and its front organizations such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the Club of Rome, NATO, UN, the Black Nobility, the Tavistock Institute, okay, CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, Tavistock Institute, which actually is linked into Stanford Research Institute, okay, in America. And that goes into Max Spear's work with the mind control, okay, CFR and all its affiliated organizations, the think tanks and research institutions controlled by Stanford. There it is, Stanford Research Institute and the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. And last, but certainly not least, the military establishment. The Committee of 300 is the ultimate secret society made up of an untouchable ruling class, which includes the Queen of the United Kingdom, the Queen of the Netherlands, the Queen of Denmark, and the royal families of Europe, These aristocrats decided at the death of Queen Victoria, the matriarch of the Venetian Black Gulfs, that in order to gain worldwide control, it would be necessary for its aristocratic members to go into business with non-aristocratic but extremely powerful leaders of corporate business on a global scale. And so the doors to ultimate power were opened to what the Queen of England likes to refer to as the commoners. Through their illicit banking cartel, they own the stock of the Federal Reserve, which is a private for-profit corporation that violates US Constitution and is a root of the problem. The decadent American families of the unholy partnership, thoroughly corrupted and wallowing in tainted opium money, went on to become what we know today as the Eastern Liberal Establishment. Its members, under the careful guidance and direction of the British Crown and subsequently its foreign policy executive arm, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, now known as Chatham House, located in England, crossing James Square from the Astors, ran the United States from top to bottom through their secret upper-level parallel government, which is tightly meshed with the Committee of 300, the ultimate secret society. That secret, all-powerful government is now more in control of the United States than ever before. So you've got a nice little diagram here showing one interpretation of this in their lens. Almighty God, gold, oil, and diamonds. So in the Committee of 300, which has 150-year history, we have some of the most brilliant intellects assembled to form a completely totalitarian, absolutely controlled new society. Only it isn't new, having drawn most of its ideas from the clubs of cultist diabolicus. Okay, it strives toward a one world government, rather well described by one of its late members, H.G. Wells, in his work, commissioned by the committee, which Wells boldly called the Opium Conspiracy Blueprints for a World Revolution. Most of the Committee 300's immense wealth arose out of the opium trade with China and India. Obscene profits went straight into the royal coffers and into the pockets of the nobility, the oligarchs and plutocrats, and made them billionaires. The ordinary people of China, India, and England profited nothing from opium revenues. In the same way, the people of South Africa, black and white, never profited from the gold mining industry, whose revenues were piped directly into the City of London banks and merchant banks. The Committee of 300 is responsible for the phony drug wars here in the US. These phony drug wars were to get us to give away our constitutional rights. Asset forfeiture is a prime example, where huge assets can be seized without trail and no proof of guilt needed. Also, the Committee of 300 long ago decreed that there shall be a much smaller and better world. That is their idea of what constitutes a better world. The myriads of useless eaters consuming scarce natural resources were to be culled up to 99%. That goes into the Georgia Guidestones, which were destroyed, if you recollect, I think back in 2023, 2024, which is quite interesting, quite telling again of this best possible timeline that's unfolding. Industrial progress supports population growth. Therefore, the command to multiply and subdue the earth found in Genesis had to be subverted. I'll put a link up actually for the a really good video going into another lens of the metaphysical grids of the earth with the Stargate structure to show what it's connected into of the site of the Georgia Guidestones, okay, done by a gentleman, which is really good. All right, so I'll pop it up on the screen here just to remind myself when I'm editing this video. So industrial progress supported population growth. Therefore, the command to multiply and subdue the earth found in Genesis had to be subverted. This called for an attack upon Christianity. The slow but sure disintegration of industrial nation states, the destruction of millions of people referred to by the Committee of 300 as surplus population, and the removal of any leader who dared to stand in the way of the committee's global planning to reach the foregoing objectives. Not that the US government didn't know, but as it was part of the conspiracy, it helped to keep the lid on information rather than let the truth be known. Queen Elizabeth II is the head of the Committee of 300, as we saw in the documents. Obviously now it's someone else because she's since deceased. The Committee of 300 looks to social convulsions on a global scale, followed by depressions as a softening up technique for bigger things to come, as its principal method of creating masses of people all over the world who will become its welfare recipients of the future. The current criminal agenda of the Committee of 300 is further evidenced by recently leaked Club of Rome documents as they describe how they will use drugs to help stifle resistance to their New World Order scheme. Having been failed by Christianity and with unemployment rife on every hand, those who have been without jobs for 5 years or more will turn away from the church to seek solace in drugs. By then, full control of the drug trade must be completed in order that the government of all countries who are under our jurisdiction have a monopoly in place which will control by controlling supplies reaching the market. Drug bars will take care of the unruly and the discontented. Would-be revolutionaries will be turned into harmless addicts with no will of their own. The crown cobras of Europe and their Eastern liberal establishment families will not tolerate any true war against drugs. The war on drugs, which the Bush administration was allegedly fighting, was for the legalization of all types and classes of drugs. Such drugs are not solely a social aberration, but a full-scale attempt to gain control of the minds of the people of the United States. Give an example, 1960s was a perfect example of that, where the Tavistock Institute, working with Stanford Research Institute, actually brought out the Beatles. Okay, they were a product of the Tavistock in order to infiltrate the movement of enlightenment that was actually rising in the 1960s. But then obviously the manufacturing of LSD was actually used to try and subjugate and infiltrate that and pacify that movement, which worked and was very successful to set up that kind of drug culture of LSD, which stood for something I can't remember, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which obviously was the song of the Beatles too, to help promote the drug, the acid, which actually worked to pacify the population. Okay, so they're very cunning, these guys. And that's the Wizard of Oz goes into that as well, where they kind of go into the opium fields and they fall asleep. Again, you got to know thy enemy, right? Until you know evil, you know nothing. Okay, but then once you know all the tricks and traps, you can't be tricked anymore. You can't be trapped. It's all about knowledge. Knowledge dispels fear, and education is how you get knowledge, because knowledge is power. And it's only through ignorance that they have any power over us. So at present, this is the principal task of the Committee of 300. Nothing has changed in the opium, heroin, cocaine trade. It's still in the hands of the same upper-class families in Britain and the United States. It is still a fabulously profitable trade, where what appeared to be big losses through sometimes seizures of drug shipments are actually small interlopers trying to break into the preserves of the drug trade hierarchy, who sit in panelled boardrooms in New York, Hong Kong and London over port and cigars and congratulate another success in the eradication of competitors. Included in the Committee of 300 membership are the old families of the European black nobility, the American Eastern liberal establishment, the Freemason hierarchy and the Order of Skull and Bones, the Illuminati, or as it is known by the committee, Mariah Conquering Wind, the Mama Group, the National World Council of Churches, the Circle of Initiates, the Nine Unknown Men, Lucis Trust, Jesuit Liberation Theologists, the Order of the Elders of Zion, the Nazi Princes, International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements, the United Nations, the Central British Qatar Coronati, Italian P2 Masonry, especially those in the Vatican hierarchy, the Central Intelligence Agency, Tavistock Institute, selected personnel, various members of leading foundations and insurance companies, the Hong Kong and the Shanghai Bank, the Milner Group Roundtable, Cine Foundation, German Marshall Fund, Ditchley Foundation, NATO, Club of Rome, Environmentalists, the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, One World Government Church, Socialist International, Black Order, Thule Society, the Annan Herb Rosicrucianists, the Great Superior Ones, and literally hundreds of other organizations. In the case of John F. Kennedy, the assassination was carried out with great attendant publicity and with the utmost brutality to serve as a warning to world leaders not to get out of line. Pope John Paul I was quietly murdered because he was getting close to the Committee of 300 through Freemasons and the Vatican hierarchy. His successor, Pope John Paul II, was publicly humiliated as a warning to cease and desist, which he has done. As we will see, certain Vatican leaders are today seated on the Committee of 300. The Committee of 300 appears to base much of its important decisions affecting mankind on the philosophy of Polish aristocrat Felix Dzerzhinsky, who regarded mankind as being slightly above the level of cattle. As a close friend of British intelligence agent Sidney Riley, Riley was actually Dzerzhinsky's controller during the Bolshevik Revolution's formative years. He often confided in Riley during his drinking bouts. Okay, Dzerzhinsky was, of course, the beast who ran the Red Terror apparatus. He once told Riley, while the two were on a drinking binge, that, open quote, man is of no importance. Look at what happens when you starve him. He begins to eat his dead companions to stay alive. Man is only interested in his own survival. That's all that counts. All the Spinoza stuff is a lot of rubbish, close quote. So the roots of the East India Company, chartered by Queen Elizabeth I on December 31st, 1600, and dissolved in 1873, sprout from the European black nobility. The black nobility are the oligarchic families of Venice and Genoa, who in the 12th century held their privileged trading rights monopolies. The first of three crusades from 1063 to 1123 established the power of the Venetian black nobility and solidified the power of the wealthy ruling class. The black nobility aristocracy achieved complete control over Venice in 1171, when the appointment of the Doge was transferred to what was known as the Great Council which consisted of members of the commercial aristocracy, a complete triumph for them. Venice has remained in their hands ever since, but the power and influence of the Venetian black nobility extends far beyond its borders, and today is felt in every corner of the globe. In 1204, the oligarchic family parcelled out feudal enclaves to their members, and from this epoch dates the great building up of power and pressure until the government became a closed corporation of the leading black nobility families. It is important to note that the European black nobility is responsible for the insidious entanglements of numerous secret societies, lodges, and organizations which are backed with high finance and powerful political connections. Such organizations include Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group, German version of CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, United Nations, founded by Council of Foreign Relations, Illuminati, Order of Skull and Bones, Inner Circle of the Council of Foreign Relations, International Monetary Fund, World Bank of International Settlement, Club of Rome, Chatham House, formerly the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Round Table, Tavistock Institute for Human Studies, England's Psychological Warfare think tank, Associated Press, Reuters, Rothschild's own news monopoly used for brainwashing the masses, and many others, all of which, whether they are dupes or adapts, work in favour of Great Britain's aristocracy and their one world government agenda. Although there is a wide cross-section, all roads lead to the Queen of England. It's interesting. The technique for keeping their illicit scheme secret is compartmentalisation. Only the people in the inner circle, who are part of the capstone at the top of the pyramid, know the entire extent of the fraud. Adepts are few and dupes many. Typically, the dupes are told lies that their involvement is benevolent. Thus, they become unwitting accomplices in crime. This is why it is imperative to expose this diabolical ring of power. Illicit secret societies cannot withstand the light of day. Once exposed, the cabal and their minions will fall like a house of cards. The European black nobility earned its title through dirty tricks, so when the population revolted against the monopolies in government, as anywhere else, the leaders of the uprising were quickly seized and brutally hanged. They used secret assassinations, murder, the bankrupting of opposing citizens or companies, kidnapping, and rape. All the families listed are connected with the House of Guelph, one of the original black nobility families of Venice, from which the House of Windsor, and thus the present Queen of the United Kingdom, Elizabeth II, descends. What are the goals of the secret elite group? The inheritors of Illuminism, Mariah conquering winds, the cult of Dionysus, the cult of Isis, Catholicism, Bogomilism. This elite group that also calls itself the Olympians, they truly believe they are equal in power and stature to the legendary gods of Olympus, who have, like Lucifer, their god, set themselves above our true God, absolutely believe they have been charged with implementing the following by divine right. Okay, one world government, new world order, with a unified church and monetary system under their direction. But not many people are aware that the One World government began setting up its church in the 1920s and 30s, for they realised the need for religious belief inherent in mankind to have an outlet, and therefore set up a church body to channel that belief in the direction they desired. The utter destruction of all national identity and national pride. The destruction of religion, and more especially the Christian religion, with the one exception, their own creation mentioned above. Control of each and every person through means of mind control and what Brzezinski called technotronics, which would create human-like robots in a system of terror, beside which Felix Brzezinski's Red Terror would look like children at play. An end to all industrialization and the production of nuclear-generated electric power in what they call the post-industrial zero-growth society. Exempted are the computer and service industries. United States industries that remain will be exported to countries such as Mexico, where abundant slave labor is available. Unemployables in the wake of industrial destruction will either become opium, heroin, or cocaine addicts, or become statistics in the elimination process we know today as Global 2000. You see that film Elysium with Matt Damon? That's kind of like the future timeline of the so-called black hole fall timeline, right? For individuals going down that path. There will be plenty of souls that will go down that path because just through the nature of natural consequence of cause and effect, based on all the decisions across all their multidimensional identities, they're set to fall. And some of them actually want to experience that. So you've got to let them be. Heal what can be healed, release what can't. That's kind of giving you like a snapshot. Terminator films, The Matrix is, Elysium, they're all giving you like Black Mirror, they're all giving you a snapshot of, different flavors of the black hole full timeline of giving your power away and just being treated like cattle. And, for those souls who've forgotten their divinity, unfortunately, they're going to be used as pawns and repurposed, and their mind's going to be employed, right? It goes into the whole origin of employment. If you can't employ your own mind, there's going to be someone there that does it for you, which mind goes into ment, which goes into the psyche, which is the soul, etc. So, yeah, certainly letting us know. Okay, but I'm certainly not choosing that. Legalization of drugs and pornography, depopulation of large cities, according to the trial run carried out by the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia. It is interesting to note that the Pol Pot's genocidal plans were drawn up here in the United States by one of the Club of Rome's research foundations. It is also interesting that the committee is presently seeking to reinstate the Pol Pot butchers in Cambodia. Again, this all goes into the eugenics programs from the fallen angelic different race strains, okay, through their Illuminati and Leviathan races that they control. They go ahead with eugenic programs to try and get rid of the competition, which is also other fallen angelics, as well as the Christic Margie Grail line races here, carrying the human angelic template of the higher DNA strand count. Suppression of all scientific development except for those deemed beneficial by the committee, especially targeted as nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. We got more than nuclear energy. We've got actually free energy, tap into the 0 point, okay, Stargate travel rather than plane travel, portal travel. Okay, but completely different worlds. We're in an anti-Christic world, so Christic world is going to be completely different. It's going to be so abundant, beautiful, prosperous, harmonious, healthy, eternal, you name it. So we're going to look forward to for those on the path of organic eternal life ascension, the best possible timeline. Particularly hated are the fusion experiments presently being scorned and ridiculed by the committee and its jackals of the press. Development of the fusion torch would blow the committee's conception of limited natural resources right out of the window. A fusion torch, properly used, could create unlimited untapped natural resources from the most ordinary substances. Fusion torch users are legion and would benefit mankind in a manner which is as yet not even remotely comprehended by the public. Caused by means of limited wars in the advanced countries and by means of starvation and diseases in third world countries, the death of 3 billion people by the year 2000, people they call useless eaters. The Committee of 300 commissioned Cyrus Vance to write a paper on the subject of how best to bring about such genocide. The paper was produced under the title of the Global 2000 Report and was accepted and approved for action by President Carter, for and on behalf of the US government, and accepted by Edwin Muskie, then Secretary of State. Under the terms of the Global 2000 Report, the population of the United States is to be reduced by 100 million by the year 2050. I mean, they might reach that target. I mean, these vaccines, right? I don't know how much damage, the long-term damage of that most of the population, unfortunately took. But however, never underestimate the power of what's coming on planet in regards to these invisible energies, the plasmids of the eternal life, fail-safe currents coming in, helping to correct and override the virus. It's like an antivirus software that's subtly coming in. These energies, the solar flares, the opening of the D-span gates. Okay, so there's definitely a really positive shift happening. We're bringing light to the darkness with a lot of confidence, assertiveness, and hope. So there's no need to fear. To weaken the moral fibre of the nation and to demoralise workers and the labour class by creating mass unemployment, as jobs dwindle due to the post-industrial zero-growth policies introduced by the Club of Rome, demoralised and discouraged workers will resort to alcohol and drugs. The youth of the land will be encouraged by means of rock music and drugs to rebel against the status quo, thus undermining and eventually destroying the family unit. In this regard, the Committee 300 commissioned Tavistock Institute to prepare a blueprint as to how this could be achieved. Tavistock directed Stanford Research to undertake the work under the direction of Professor Willis Harmon. This work later became known as the Aquarian Conspiracy. To keep people everywhere from deciding their own destinies by means of one created crisis after another and then managing such crises. This will confuse and demoralise the population to the extent where faced with too many choices, apathy on a massive scale will result. In the case of the United States, an agency for crisis management is already in place. It's called the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, whose existence I first disclosed in 1980. This is an ex-intelligence agent, I believe, who wrote this article, to introduce new cults and continue to boost those already functioning with, which include rock music gangsters such as the filthy, degenerate Mick Jagger's Rolling Stones, a gangster group much favoured by European black nobility, and all of the Tavistock created rock groups, which began with the Beatles, okay, to continue to build up the cult of Christian fundamentalism begun by the British East India Company's servant, Derby, which will be misused to strengthen the Zionist state of Israel, to identify with the Jews through the myth of God's chosen people, and by donating very substantial amounts of money to what they mistakenly believe is a religious cause in the furtherance of Christianity. To press for the spread of religious cults, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim fundamentalism, the Sikhs, and to carry out experiments of the Jim Jones and Son of Sam type of murders, it is worth noting that the late Ayatollah Khamenei was a creation of British intelligence military Military Intelligence Division 6, commonly known as MI6, as I reported in my 1985 work, what really happened in Iran. According to Max Spears, it goes up to, they've got MI1 to MI9, okay? So 14, to export religious liberation ideas around the world is to undermine all existing religions, but more especially the Christian religion. This began with the Jesuit liberation theology, which brought about the downfall of the Somoza family rule in Nicaragua, and which is today destroying El Salvador, now 25 years into a civil war, Costa Rica and Honduras. One very active entity engaged in so-called libertarian theology is the communist-oriented Maryknoll mission. This accounts for the extensive media attention to the murder of 4 of Maryknoll's so-called nuns in El Salvador a few years ago. The 4 nuns were communist subversive agents, and their activities were widely documented by the government of El Salvador. The United States press and news media refused to give any space or coverage to the massive documentation and possession of the Salvadorian government, documentation which proves what the Maryknoll mission nuns were doing in the country. Maryknoll is in service in many countries and played a leading role in bringing communism to Rhodesia, Mozambique, Angola, South Africa. So obviously, you know, whatever they perpetuate on the media, which is the Greek goddess of illusion, they're deliberately trying to stir up division, hate, there'll be agendas and ulterior motives behind that in order to act as the interface to the public to help direct and steer consciousness in the minds of the public. Hence why governments are linked to gouverner, which is to steer a boat, as is religions, which is the mooring of a vessel, in order to capture and steer the consciousness of humanity. Govern the mind. 15, to cause a total collapse of the world's economies and engender total political chaos. 16, to take control of all foreign domestic policies of the United States. We can read this out because we know the timeline you're on. If you're ascending out of it, it's not going to happen. If you're shifting the grids of the earth, and with the grids of the earth, that's shifting into the higher timeline, this is not going to happen. And like I said, bringing light into the darkness helps expose them, so we can all collectively withdraw our consent and say, no, bugger off, this ain't going to work. So your plans have been futile. To give the fullest support to supernatural institutions such as the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements, the World Court, as far as possible, make local institutions of lesser effect by gradually phasing them out, bringing them under the mantle of the United Nations. That's certainly been happening, especially with the central banks. Local community banking infrastructure has mostly been destroyed ever since the central banks were established in America. I think over 20,000 local community banks have closed since the Federal Reserve was set up there. And then Europe, the ECB, I think over 10,000 local community banks have closed. So you can see this move to centralization is definitely happening. Organize a worldwide terrorist apparatus and negotiate with terrorists whenever terrorist activities take place. It will be recalled that it was Bettino Craxi who persuaded the Italian and US governments to negotiate with the Red Brigade's kidnappers of Prime Minister Moro and General Dozier. As an aside, General Dozier is under orders not to talk about what happened to him. Should he break that silence, he will no doubt be made a horrible example of in the manner in which Kissinger dealt with Aldo Moro, Ali Bhutto, and General Zia ul Haq. Take control of education in America with the intent and purpose of utterly and completely destroying it. Most of these goals, which are first enumerated in 1969, have since been achieved or are well on their way to being achieved. Of special interest in the Committee 300 program is the core of the economic policy, which is largely based on the teachings of Malthus, the son of an English country person, who was pushed to prominence by the British East India Company, upon which the Committee 300 is modelled. Okay, Malthus maintained that man's progress is tied to the Earth's natural ability to support a given number of people, beyond which point Earth's limited resources would rapidly be depleted. Once these natural resources have been consumed, it will be impossible to replace them. Hence, Malthus observed, it is necessary to limit populations within their boundaries of decreasing natural resources. It goes without saying that the elite will not allow themselves to be threatened by a Bulgarian population of useless eaters. Hence, culling must be practiced. As I previously stated, culling is going on today using the methods mandated in the Global 2000 report. Dr. John Coleman, former British intelligence officer at the Conspirators Hierarchy, the Committee of 300. Okay, so yeah, brilliant article. Just otherwise highlighting the pernicious nature of these folks and individuals who have obviously usurped control of the global assets and are in breach of trust. But otherwise, you know, this is kind of in their nature, very deceitful, especially that goes into the progenitors of, you know, the kind of codes and aggressive gene codes that they're carrying down here, that they take on the mindset of these fallen angelics, these fallen race line consciousness collectives. Okay, and just like we see with the Washington Consensus, this whole kind of apparatus through these international agencies to bring every third world country back up to the first world country, that Rich Dave Werner completely exposes the nature of banking and the policies that they choose, and how that even government regulation doesn't recognize the fact that banks are creators of credit. Every time a loan is issued, they treat them as financial intermediaries, even in academia. Shows the pernicious natures of these folks and how they hide behind the best interest of humanity and the goals that we want to achieve is get everyone up into equality. That this kind of, I guess, whole trust decree kind of echoes in a sense with, wanting to roll out all these global assets for the benefit of the people. However, there seems to be a little bit more surrounding this, like feeling into the spirit of the story. There does seem to be some genuineness behind it, okay, in regards to their claims. And, this website set up, but who knows? Wait and see what happens. Cannot rely on these folks, but otherwise just, watch this space out of interest, and otherwise take it upon yourself to become educated, be the change you wish to see, and learn how to manage your estate, come out of the public side into the private side to, govern every aspect of your life from, health to wealth, learning the legal tricks and traps, okay, and the kind of game that's being played even on a high level with the spiritual esoteric sciences and history, technologies, races, agendas, and you'll be more than empowered and prepared for anything that comes our way within the timeline, which I believe we're on the best possible timeline, but there's a shift happening, and like any shift or like any birth of a new system, of a new timeline, of a new kind of transition, there'll be a lot of anxiety, sweat, maybe a bit of pain, turbulence, before inevitably, this new shift is birthed, and we can enjoy its fruits and look forward to the future. Okay, so I hope you folks enjoyed that. It's a long presentation now, over 3 hours, but I felt it's necessary just to kind of wrap up and tie up all the loose ends involved in this incredible story that I highly recommend going over multiple times, right, in order to 7 times exposure, embed it into the consciousness, become unconsciously competent with it all, and help share the story, and put pressure on these guys. Like I said, I mean, all the world assets are there. We know that. These folks have just kept keeping it locked up for themselves. It's up to each and every one of us to withdraw our consent and steer this hologram into more crystic waters through the realization that we are all co-creators with God Source. We're all manifestors, but we can only manifest that which we're consciously aware of and willfully desiring to sustain or create. Okay, there's unfortunately many unconscious individuals out there sustaining the current system. There's many other individuals like us, yourself watching this, myself, that want to actively participate in shifting it. Okay, and we do that together. And like I said, the 100th monkey effect doesn't actually have to be that much of us to get our hands dirty, do the dirty work, learn about all this kind of stuff within the shadow of the governments and the world structures and the shadows within ourselves, shine the light, expose them, and hold them accountable. Okay, so that's what they rely on, is our ignorance and us not forcing change, because they know through us we manifest. If there's enough of us wanting to express our will of what we want, it will manifest. Okay, they will have nowhere else to go, nowhere else to hide but to serve. And if they don't want to serve, they've got the timeline of the Black Hole Full timeline, which is the whole Occupy Mars movement, Musk's transhumanist agenda, Project 2025 under Trump. Okay, so we've got to take it upon ourselves. We can't put all our eggs in the basket of Earth with these folks trying to roll out what we've all been hoping for. We've got to take it upon ourselves to don the life jacket, realize that we're on a Titanic that is sinking, seek the lifeboat, okay, which is otherwise known about the esoteric side of things, with the spirituality, merging the science with spirit, okay, with the mystery schools and the new age scientific approach of these philosophies, ancient texts, history, races, agendas, in archery history, for that matter, become empowered and govern every facet of your life, from the one-dimensional plane all the way up to the 12th-dimensional plane and beyond. Okay, none more so than these two-dimensional paper realm contracts or paper fiction procedures, legal tricks and traps. So I hope you enjoyed that, folks. I'll leave the links below to the Dropbox file and folder where you can have some of these documents. But otherwise, like I said, most of it is over here on this website, kingsolomontrust.com. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope you go away and research more of it. Share this video, make videos yourself, let everyone know. Let's hold these guys accountable, okay, and let the world know that yes, the Committee of 300 does exist, Yes, there is an agenda. Yes, they have usurped funds. Yes, inequality, poverty, and all the problems we have on planet is contrived, it is engineered, it's not natural. It is deliberately being schemed about, implemented through these agencies and these think tanks. It's about time all of us, roll up our sleeves, become conscious of this, and consciously demand change. Okay, and be the change we wish to see. All right, folks, thanks for your patience. Those of you who lasted this long, well done to you. Big pat on the back. You've got what it takes to be the change and to be a very good investigator. Like I said, researcher, ask the right questions and be on the right timeline without a doubt. Okay, so I send my love to you as always in protection, safety, and may we all be blessed and on the best possible timeline and enjoy the fruits of even more revelations and truth on this journey and wisdom as we're all in this together and we're all a divine expression of the same God source first eternal as individuated units of consciousness. Don't ever forget that. Merely enjoying these holographic arenas, okay, in space, time, and matter to explore free will and potentialities and possibilities for pretty much eternity. All right, so thanks for listening, guys. Take care out there. Stay safe, stay sovereign as always, and protect yourselves and just study hard and share this information. All the best. God bless.